All right. Maybe it's
Hey, success.
That's weird. So I had just closed out of the file and then reopened it. So okay, so I'll get started. Sorry about that. I'm hoping you guys all had a chance to just briefly look at the email that I sent this afternoon. I apologize for it only coming today. I would have liked to send it earlier, but there was some things going on in the background that needed to get answered, I guess, before the budget got finalized. So I basically sent it out as quick as I could. First, just going to touch on very briefly. There's two things I think that changed from the last meeting. The Bell Alliant grant in lieu, we had budgeted last year at 36,946. That should come in at the same amount. And you'll notice that that amount on your last version would have been 3,158 higher. I have the number right here. So basically that final number came in, so it reduced the revenue by 3,158.
More good news.
Yeah, exactly. Luckily, it's not that much, but
No.
I'm not going to bring it up right now. Expense side, the number that you guys seen today, we'll see it when we roll thereafter. The deficit for the housing authority, which is on page 12 of 19, is showing 107,517, and that one was increased by approximately, I think it was $9,017. That one went up by, so a little bit of a net difference, around $12,000 in added cost in the budget. So just to go back through some of what we talked about the other night, a week ago tonight. If you look on the revenue section here, we had talked about staff going back and working in an increased tax rate of 4 cents. And those new numbers highlighted in red for residential, commercial, and resource are what new numbers would be as a result of a 4 cent tax increase. And this is the difference in revenue generated as a result. So I think we had said around 360,000, so it works out to 363,225. So that means it's 9,806% of increase.
Okay.
And if you just want the breakdown, which may be beneficial or not, but for 1 cent, 78,190 is the residential increase, and 12,608 is the commercial increase. So the commercial impact is very small compared to the residential impact. Let me see. I think that we're changes in the revenue side. But sure. I'm just going to bring up the expense sheet and then try to share that one with the brief. You can still see the revenue one, I assume.
Yeah, we can see the revenue sheet. Is that, no, sorry, we can see the expense summary. Is that what you were asking?
Yeah.
Yeah, your expense one is up now.
The expense one is up now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so I would say my pause, but anyways. Oh, this is annoying. We're back. So you can see the Public Health and Welfare Services tab now.
Yeah,
That was the one amount went to 107,517, and the difference is $9,017. Okay, so just the other changes that we had talked about. In the public works section, tab 4, environmental health service.
Jason, you're cutting in and out.
yeah.
I'm cutting in and out.
Yeah.
Okay, so can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'm at the landfill closure costs. Basically, the number was 361,000 before, and council had talked about reducing it by 200,000. And what we did, so that's the 200,000 there. What we did is we further reduced it by 39.55, assuming that we would put in 157,071. And the number is just odd because that's the number that we generally use to just balance the budget to a deficit, to a balance of 0, just to make it work.
Okay.
And then there was the issue in the email.
Jason, you're having real. Jason, your
Yeah.
sound is really bad.
Is it?
So you know what I'd suggest? I'd suggest maybe calling in the Zoom number and using a telephone, like a cell phone, if you have good enough cell reception. Because I think
I thought
your
last
video-
time when you took your when he took his earphones out. Oh, you don't have your earphones in.
No, I do, but I'm using a different computer this week because to try to get it to work with the earphones.
Because last time when you didn't have the earphones, it was really clear.
Yeah.
I also say too that if Jason can stop his video, us seeing him, I think sometimes the sound is better there too. Like the internet connection's more stable.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. If he wanted to keep his video, because he's sharing his screen, right?
Yeah, if you
So-
stop your video, is that gonna? Yeah, so maybe try that, Jason.
Can you hear me better now? Or?
Let's try that for a little bit.
Okay, so where was I at here? So in the general government services, as I said, we reduced the issue about the confidence. We took that out. And then when we get down to the transfer to reserves, we had talked about taking that down by 75,000 to 100,000. But right now we have it at 40. So basically there's the 75,000. We took it down another 60,000 to get to 40. And the reason we did that is because basically the amount, we're talking about transferring an amount from operating reserve.
It's still pretty choppy, Jason.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it might be
You
the
just-
earphones again. Just try without the earphones.
Whatever Laurier's doing, he's clear as a bell.
Yeah, I think it's the earphones
Read it.
too.
any better now or no?
Yep. Are the earphones out?
The earphones are out, yeah.
You're clear as a day, as a bell.
We just need to increase the volume here so I can hear you guys better.
Yeah.
You can probably put your video back on too if you want to.
So you can hear me better now? Okay.
It needs to be.
I think you're still going to be broke up, though. I think it's the.
Might
But
be
try
the-
it.
Might be the internet connection, but yeah, so the idea was that rather than have a transfer from operating reserves and then a transfer to capital reserve, it probably just makes sense to have one transfer either in or out of reserves. Because in essence, what you'd be doing is you'd just be taking money from the operating reserve and moving it to the capital reserve. So if at all possible, we'd like to avoid a transfer from a reserve and just net any amount that we're looking to make up off of this 40,000 here or in the landfill closure reserve. So those are the two numbers that we potentially like to play with in order to balance the budget. Have you heard that all right? Or
Yeah. Yeah, I did.
okay. So
And I think that's what we talked about last time as well, right? Was that it just created a bit of confusion by having it in a couple of spots.
yeah, I mean, if you have a transfer in the operating fund from the operating reserve and you have a transfer to capital reserve from the operating fund, the net of the two amounts is basically what you're saving or what you're
Yeah.
bringing in to spend.
Yeah.
So So again, I'd rather just see the capital reserve transfer or the landfill closure transfer come down to a more manageable level to balance the budget rather than take from operating reserve. It just makes more sense, I think, to do it this way. So once we remove that other amount from the confidential matter, it gave us a shortfall of 63,000 and change. So that's where this 60,000 came from. And then that's where I lowered the landfill closure transfer by 39.55. So that would balance the budget. So if council was comfortable with putting this 157,071 into landfill and then putting this 40,000 into capital reserve with a 4-cent tax increase and everything else that you guys wanted to include, it would work the budget out. And I also had put in 300 here, which was the number you guys had decided, and that amount was going up by 60,500.
Jason, there was also a change in the regional health general type 4 number.
Yeah, that's what he's
the
looking
number
at there.
I have up right now.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were done. Sorry.
It's okay, yeah. This is the funding contribution number, so you guys wanted to add an extra 60,500 there. So that's that number. I don't think that any other numbers change besides that. So we just wanted to get your thoughts on the budget as it stands today, I guess, and the balanced as it is right now, which is what I said in the email. But again, it's a 4-cent tax rate increase that is included in this budget.
Okay. So,
So can we pull some of the money out of our gas reserves into our into funding like the straight area transit or?
No, so the gas tax fund is meant for capital projects only, and there's a criteria, as you guys have been talking about in past meetings.
Yeah.
So the gas tax fund would be dealt with on a case-by-case basis, project by project, and we would make sure that it qualifies before council approves the gas tax fund project, but it wouldn't affect this operating budget tonight.
Yeah, so for me, I mean, I guess looking into the future, we're just new at this, but looking into the future, Jason, I think you're right. But I think what has to happen here is that we have to better understand what the plans are for straight area transit, what the plans are, when it comes to all these funding opportunities. So, is straight area transit going to build a new building? We can't fund a new vehicle, but what are they going to do with it? I mean, you look at point 7, which is public transit, and you look at point 18, which talks of capacity building, which means management planning, public transit, and network planning when it comes to public transit. So we got to better understand what these groups are asking for, where they're going to spend their money, and if we can spend the 100,000 of the gas tax fund on straight area transit, then that's 100,000 less that's on our contribution funding list, right? So we got to better understand what's available through gas tax. We got to better understand if we can use the gas tax, and maybe it's a way to lower this hit when it comes to a tax increase.
Yeah, so as I've said before, the gas tax fund, traditionally speaking, has been spent, probably 99%, I guess someone could correct me from staff if I'm wrong, but probably 99% of gas tax has been spent on our own municipal capital project. There's only been a handful of times that we ventured into providing gas tax funding to an external organization. So I think what we had said in a past meeting is that council is interested in exploring different opportunities for the gas tax fund, and then of course we would recommend that you make a policy that would cover how the gas tax money gets spent, and potentially, what percentage of allocation maybe in any given year could go towards either third parties or what have you, and what types of projects you would spend it on. This 100,000, and I could be wrong, but this 100,000 that we have allocated in this budget, an operating contribution from our operating fund. So I would argue that that 100,000 can't be funded with gas tax money. It's council's ability to take that 100 and either increase it or decrease it or squash it. But really what we're talking about tonight is this 100,000 is budgeted in the operating fund. If you were looking at doing a capital project with SAD in mind, it's a totally separate discussion from this, I guess, is what I would say.
Right. The money we give to SAT is for their operations.
Right.
Right. Like their meeting was deferred because the pandemic kind of blew everything up last Wednesday when they were supposed to meet. But you know, the preliminary budget that I've seen, it's fully used in operations. So.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
That's what I thought you were going to say.
Yeah, I mean, there's an intent there to move some money to their own capital reserve, right? Their own vehicle reserve, but that's not what we give them money for.
Okay, so for this year, Straight Area Transit isn't planning anything infrastructure related that we could potentially
That we could
offset
no, because they don't have any, like, again, it's still got to go through the board, right? But
Yeah.
but there's nothing there that's the intention is to, you know, they may buy a vehicle, but there would be tons of funding in all different places. And then the balance of that might come out of they have a capital reserve that they've been, you know, gathering themselves. So some of their money, you know, some of their surplus goes to a capital reserve if they when they have one. So, I mean, you know, theoretically some of our money could end up there, but it's not a direct line.
Okay.
Another thing I was looking at was like page 8 of the expenses when it comes to provincial roads, 166.8, let's say 167,000. You know, so again, Jason, that 167,000, is that, you know, infrastructure? Is that road maintenance? Is that, you know, something that we could use the gas tax fund for and get 167,000 out of expenses?
Yeah, no, so the same concept applies, is that is to cover the cost of roads that the province maintains on our behalf. I believe Chris sent out the list of the roads to you guys. So again, these are mandatory contributions. So again, that's something that the operating budget and mandatory. So that's where it needs to stay.
So, Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought, looking over the budget, and I'm just looking for my pages here, but I could have sworn that there was over $200,000 or $300,000 allocated to roads last year, 284 or something like that.
No.
And it looked like some of the money come out of the capital funding. I'm not sure.
Are you talking the budget sheets or?
You're probably looking at the 5-year capital plan, Mike.
Might be referring to the industrial park road that we installed there. You know?
Yeah.
So we did use the gas tax fund for that road, correct?
Yeah, you can, for constructing a road, you can't use it for operating and maintenance fees. So.
Yeah, and we didn't use on that Lennox Passage Road, we didn't use gas tax funds. It was done out of operating. But again, it's project specific, Sean. And Michael. So if you got a project in mind, the first step is to add it to the capital list. And then the second step is to get staff to investigate that project and look for sources of funding. And then we will determine whether it qualifies and come back to council as to whether that's an option or not. But it's project specific based. Everything that's in this operating budget, for the most part, the things you're bringing up right now have to be where they're at.
So if I could, I mean, you know, I think what I'm hearing is perhaps like people looking for strategies for us to reduce our requirement to increase taxes. So I can appreciate that. I mean, if we're looking at doing that through using gas tax funds, right? Like you go through, there's really nothing else that we could use it for. Now that said, You know, we do have $157,000 allocated to the landfill closure. We do have 40,000 allocated to our regular reserves. And again, if we're getting double our gas tax money, and that money is in a reserve, because that's what gas tax money is, basically a reserve of money. I mean, we even though we're not doing what we wanted to do, which was put money away, sort of indirectly we are doing that through the gas tax. Like in my mind, I wasn't thinking about it like that in terms of, well, we don't need to reserve those things because we could use that excess gas tax that the government has said we're going to get, right? When they're talking about doubling our gas tax, that's going to the reserve and that could serve the same purpose. I do think we're still just kind of deferring this liability that we have, right? So we'd have that extra gas tax money, and that might be better served, in my opinion, for special projects that we want to do as we move forward versus covering off these reserves. Because we can easily get a $200,000 out of this, right? We can easily cut our tax increase to 2 cents easily, right? Just for the reserves.
That's where I'd like to see it, Melanie, to be honest. Right?
Well,
I mean,
then, you know what I mean? Then that's something that we need to chat about, right? Because if we can do that for sure. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, but if we basically kill both of those reserve numbers, we're basically at a 2 cent tax increase to balance this thing.
Yeah, I mean,
Back to
yeah, go ahead,
square
Chris.
one, with no money going in reserves, and gas tax cannot be used for equipment, which is what part of those reserves are being put aside for.
Right.
The
So you
landfill
can't use
closure
gas
cost
tax to offset something.
is an equipment.
Pardon?
When we're going to close the landfill, that's equipment, not a
That's
gas
one of the
tax item.
reserves, but you mentioned the second reserve. That one was for heavy equipment at the landfill for fleet vehicles. So that reserve.
Yeah, I was just talking about that little 40, and then I was talking about the landfill. Just
No, I
those
get
two.
it.
Landfill could possibly qualify, but we would have to ask. We're not really investing in infrastructure, or we're capping a landfill site. So I'm not 100% sure if that would qualify.
Well, it says eligible projects, solid waste management. So
I guess that's the only challenge, Melanie, is that it's not as easy as saying that we'll just use the gas tax fund to do these things. So as an example, part of that 40,000, let's just say that if that number was 40,000 and that was to buy a truck, well, okay, we can't use gas tax for that. So
yeah,
the simple answer is we need to put aside for trucks and equipment and the things that Chris is talking about. And then the second side of it is the landfill closure reserve is an amount to close the landfills, and Chris can correct me if I'm wrong, but you wouldn't be able to use gas tax to do that either. So that straight has to come from the landfill closure. So to squash that landfill amount to zero, let's just say, we're not opposed to it being reduced some. I guess to squash it to zero, I think would be very counterproductive.
I didn't hear Chris say that it can't be used. I heard Chris say he doesn't know if it can be used, and I don't know. The document I'm looking at just says one of the eligible projects would be solid waste management, which is our landfill.
We would
So
have
Chris,
to the province and get confirmation.
I think we need to do that, honestly, because we're in a year where our gas tax funding is doubled. There may be more flexibility this year than there have been in other years because of that. I don't know. That's just pure speculation. But I think it would be really helpful to us making a final decision to find out if the landfill closure could be eligible.
And just keep in mind, we can't just transfer that money to the landfill closure reserve. When we incur an expenditure, if it qualifies, we could use gas tax. So
Right.
not that
So
you're
that
going
wouldn't really work
Yeah,
this year
that's
then
fine.
in that case anyway, because the landfill closure is not going to happen this year regardless.
well, there's not enough money now. If council wants to use gas tax and it qualifies, then you could potentially look at it. But we're still short $1.5 million. I mean, it's not insignificant.
And I'm totally not opposed to putting money aside. Please do not misunderstand. Like I am completely in favor of that. But I just, as I think about this extra gas tax money, and although it wouldn't be technically sitting in the landfill closure account, if we knew in our own mind that it was allocated for that purpose, like we wouldn't pre-spend it, for lack of a better word, and we could reduce the hit on property taxes this year, it probably is just deferring the inevitable. We probably then need to increase them another 2 cents next year, because we're going to need to then put money into those reserves properly, but if we could lessen the burden this year and use that excess gas tax, and again, whether that's just sort of an internal allocation, that this gas tax money, we're going to use some of it to use for the landfill when we're ready to do that.
No, I mean, and where you're going with it, Melanie, is totally fair. I mean, if there's any appetite, which it seems there is, to reduce the increase in tax rate, then the landfill closure and the current 40,000 in capital reserve is where we would recommend doing it, only because, again, those are things pressurized where the cut in services is going to happen or what have you. It's those are the numbers that we always end up playing with at the end. So your approach is totally fair. It's just that, again, it's about trying to find the balance between saying, well, do we do it now? Do we do it later? Do we do it this year and next year, and by how much, and what do we want to put aside?
I think it's one of those things, I don't know, if there was comments made around the table before that, maybe making comments about, thinking the previous council didn't put enough aside, for a rainy day for future expenses being incurred. So, I mean, we're likely going to have to do it at some point or another, or we can, or we stop complaining about the past council doing it if we're going to do the same thing.
Well, that's my feeling. But I would agree, Councillor Sampson. But I guess the only comment that I'd make now is one I've made in the past is that this problem didn't happen in 1 year, and we're not going to be able to fix it in 1 year. So if we have to take a gradual approach, I would,
But even the 360 wouldn't have solved it anywhere near 1 year, right? Like that would have been a 5 year.
No.
So we've cut that in half. So we're still looking, maybe 10 years before this could be, without looking at gas tax funds, we're still maybe 10 years off or so. So, I mean, I don't know that we want to keep cutting at that just because it's convenient and it's popular, but.
Yeah, no, I would agree.
No, I agree. I don't think we want to keep cutting, but again, we don't want to slam our, especially this year with COVID and the loss and the jobs. We don't want to slam our residents with a 4% increase on their taxes either. Saying that, I guess one of the topics that was on discussion last week, and I know it's not a comfortable one, but I'm going to bring it up anyway, is the rate increase for the I guess the salary increase at the at the municipality level. And again, so I definitely, it's not that I don't feel everybody is deserving of their raise, because that's not it, but I do feel that a 4 to 5 cent or 4 to 5% increase is at this time is very high, considering we're going to have to go back to our constituents. Some that have lost their jobs, some that haven't worked, some that are trying to get, COVID money, and let them know that we're increasing taxes, but yet at the same time, we're increasing the salaries of the employees. I know for the Department of Transportation, there's a wage freeze on us, so it's not regardless if you were due for an increase or not, you're not getting it. Now, I think in saying that, in all fairness, nobody works for free, and just working out some of the numbers, I do agree that the 1% cost of living is automatic, and I think this year it would be fair to say to add another 1% to match that, to give a 2% across the board, and then review it again next year. That way there, it looks like we're giving a 2% increase in salary, and we're also only giving a possibly a 2-cent increase in the
tax rate.
I think you got to understand though too, Mike, it's not a 2%. It wouldn't be a 2% across the board, because again, I'm assuming there's a lot of people that aren't up for these merit increases, right? That's just specific to their contract kind of thing, and where it was put aside last year by staff. I mean, you think of that too.
I agree, but last year, unfortunately, wasn't our kind of like what's kind of like the money owed. It's not something that we, I guess, we encountered, but it's not something we can solve overnight. And last year compared to this year, last year we lost over $900,000 in revenue. This year we had COVID slam, many households and many businesses that lost thousands and thousands of dollars. So I'm personally just looking at revenue. Honestly, I can use my own, I probably lost $40,000, $50,000 in revenue compared to the previous year. So I'm sure there's businesses that I know had to close their doors for the same reason. It's just very hard to explain to the constituents that, that it's, that we're giving a 4% increase, even if it's only those that are eligible for it. So in saying that, I don't want it to sound like So I don't know if we need a motion on that and we can keep it separate. I'm going to be honest. For me, I feel that we have some due diligence to do as well. So I for one can say that, you know, I had internet prior to being a counselor. And to me, I feel that, you know, if the 5 of us look at the internet service or the internet check that we get and we defer that back to the county, then I personally am okay with that. I believe at some point everybody has to take a little bit of a hit, and you know, again, I think that's part of the hit that us as counselors can take as well, just to show the our constituents and the public that, you know, we're not looking to take it from everyone else. We're also looking to balance it out. So that's just my thought.
Yeah, I think, I mean, if you want to look, even some of those things, I guess we got that Superport days is now, that looks like that'll be virtual. So there's probably no need in putting 1,500 for that either. And I don't know what the chamber stuff is going to look like, but you know, there's lots of these little things we could probably pick away at too, I suppose. Because we got the invite for the Superport thing, and that's going to be virtual, I guess. So it's no need,
Yeah,
you know what I
it
mean,
is.
for 1,500 like it would have been other years.
I think it was 1250, Councillor Sampson. But to your point, yeah, we do need to find, if we're going to reduce the tax rate, if we're going to move the needle on taxes, you know, we want to, we're going to have to look for big chunks. But I also understand your gesture there, Mike, in terms of the, you know, of it being a gesture, for sure. I get it.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Like, I mean, for me, I had internet long before I became a counselor, and if that $100 means it goes to someone else in this community that needs it more than I do, then I have no. To be honest, I give it away every month. Right. So, you know, and to Mike's point about COVID and you know, this taxing, you know, when you look at 4%, when you look at 4% across the board, and you look at 2.5% from PVSC, when it comes to a tax assessment, I did the numbers, and when it comes to an assessment between $100,000 and $200,000, that is a 6% increase, and 200,000 and higher, it's an 8% increase. You know, so I took the time the past week to go around my district with a pen and paper and just jot down some numbers, and 67% of my district is either on EI, on a pension, or retired. They're not going to get an 8% increase from EI, from their pension, from their old age pension. So if we put an 8% increase on them, they're going to go backwards in their life, right? So it's concerning for me, right? I'm not going to lie. That's
For sure.
Well, and again, I personally, I believe it's something, you know, like every year we look at the budget, and it's definitely something that next year, you're right. It's our turn that if it's every second year, they lost it last year, which would have actually been only up for renewal next year. But I don't believe that they should sit out another year without getting any increase. That's not where I'm going with this. And again, I believe people work hard, and you do work hard for your money, same as everybody else. Otherwise you wouldn't go into work every day. So, you know, it's just one of those things where I think, I personally believe that, you know, we kind of got to do our due diligence on this. And, you know, if we're increasing on one side, we have to take a little bit of a hit on the other. You know, it's not, I guess, adequate, or, you know, it's not the best case scenario, but a 2%, I guess a 2% increase is better than no increase in my books. And honestly, for me, giving back or holding back the $1,200 a year is, you know, if that's all that has to be done to balance our budget a little better, then every little bit helps.
Okay. So, so any other comments? I mean, I'm hearing sort of a discussion on trying to get us closer to a 2-cent tax increase as opposed to 4.
I mean, I will say I do have a couple of quick comments.
Yeah,
like
please, yes.
Although I think we are delaying the inevitable, like I would be fine with moving to a 2-cent and adjusting our reserves. I am not okay with removing the merit increases and the CPI increases for staff. I don't care what we do with our $100 a month, couldn't care less. I do care about that. I would not support removing that merit increase. They gave it up last year, and I don't support that. If we want to start trimming, let's start trimming our funding contributions, right? Because that's really money that we're going to spend in different areas. That's my opinion, right? Like if we're not getting rid of the CPI and you're talking about getting rid of the merit, which is 48,000. If you're saying, well, maybe we'd give another %, well, that's really now we're only talking about saving 25,000. But we've increased our funding number by 60,000. So like there are other areas that we've kind of padded a bit. And so, like I said, for me, I said it last time and I'll say it again. I do not support removing that that means we'd have to have a vote to decide, then so be it. But
Well,
Yeah,
and again,
and
I agree.
I don't think Deputy Warden is talking about removing it. Just probably just doing the same thing with the tax rate, right? Just doing it in layers, right? Just doing it in steps. I mean, if it's 4% every second year, and you did it 2% this year and 2% next year, instead of skipping a year, then I mean, for example, anybody that's making 60,000 with 4% this year and 4% next year, that would be 62.4, and 62.4, that's 125,000. If you do 2% and 2%, this year is 61.2. The following year is 62.424. That's a total of $1,326 over the 2-year period. Right?
but we are kind of talking about pennies here. Like we're not talking about a lot of money.
No, we're not, right? But we're talking about saving the 4% this year and just going 2 and 2, right? The end result is, like you said, Melanie, it's not a lot of money. It's $1,300 in the difference over 24 months. It's $57 a month. It's $14 a week to go in gradual steps, 2 and 2 instead of 4 this year and then next year, right?
It's also, what does it say when we come in and we're here all of 20 minutes and we decide we know what's best for them when, they've already put it off 1 year. And so if we did half of it this year, half of it next year, it only gets them at the point they should have been last year.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I guess to that point, Brent, the reason it wasn't last year, if I understand correctly from Jason, was because they held off. They recommended themselves because of the 900,000 loss in revenue, right? So if they would have taken it last year, then we wouldn't have been looking at it until next year. So I guess we wouldn't have been, yeah.
That's right, but should they be punished for trying to help out last time?
No, I'm not trying to punish them. What I'm looking at is that we're looking at going back to our constituents and saying that we're increasing 2 to 4 cents on the per $100 worth of assessment for people who haven't worked all year long or that are on, that had COVID or COVID related businesses or that had to shut their doors. And at the same time, we're giving our staff a raise. I think that's probably where it's is a little tricky.
We're also giving our funding. We're also giving our funding contribution a raise of $108,000.
Yeah, we're putting our funding up way more, and a lot of that's not even allotted to anything specific. This is just basically, to have in case some good things come up that we want to have some leeway, right? But if we don't have the backing of staff, I don't think we have anything.
Well,
So, could I just
we knew
ask
coming
a
into this
question?
that things were going to be tight and we were going to have to make tough decisions. Nobody likes putting the tax rate up, but I don't think cutting it on the back of staff is the way to go when they already put it off for themselves last year.
And I don't think, Brent, that we're trying to decide what's best for someone 20 minutes in. That's not my intention at all. I'm just trying to soften the blow here for everybody involved, right? You know what I mean? That's my only intention here, right? To try to soften the blow to the taxpayer and try to get our wish list, everybody's wish list, right? That's my goal, right? So I mean, we're to go on the other side of what Mike is saying. Mike is saying, people have lost their jobs and people got hit by COVID-19 and all this stuff. But you also got to look at we're sitting here in a virtual meeting in our houses, safe, and you got essential workers that are out there taking care of older people today, right? Are they going to get an 8% increase in their wage? No, they're not. They're going to get an 8% tax increase for saying thanks for what you did the last year and a half, right? it's a tough pill to swallow, whichever way you look at it, right? It's a tough pill to swallow.
I do
How
want
did
to
you
make
come
a
up with
point that
8%?
your public works
So-
staff is still out working despite the pandemic. So that statement about us being at home is not accurate for all of staff.
No, I'm talking about us,
No, I
Chris.
think he
I'm
meant,
talking about
I
us.
think he meant counselors, Chris.
Yeah, I'm
So
talking
I
about
just-
us, Chris. I'm not, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just going to interject here for a moment because I just want to revisit the funding contribution conversation. We had, I think, a budget of 269 last year. Is that, please correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, or I don't know if there's, could you go to that area of the budget on your screen?
It was 239, Warden.
239, right.
No, it was at 192,055 last year.
Right.
And the proposal was 239.5 until the last week's meeting, which it's now at 300.
It was 192,
Right, last year.
21.
Right.
192,055 last year.
Right.
Right
Right.
now it sits at 300.
Right, okay. Okay, I just wanted
Now-
that clarification.
Now going back to the 239, which is 40,000 extra, and then adding 60,000 extra, just in case stuff comes up. Again, the stuff that we're talking about is the Monument Park in Petitgraw. We're talking about the Friends of St. John's. We're talking about the Ayrshad Recreation Park. All that stuff pertains and can be used by the gas tax fund. So we can squash that 60,000 off our capital funding. And when it comes to recreation infrastructure, and it comes to cultural infrastructure, and it comes to arts, and recreation and cultural infrastructure, we can use that stuff for the 3 or 4 contribution items that we've added the 60,000 for. So,
Right, we would need to create some policy around that. Yeah.
well, I don't know about the policy. I mean, the gas tax fund says that you can use it. It's right there. I mean, we don't have a policy, but I'm sure the council will approve in a motion to approve that until we put a policy in place, but it states it right there on the documentation that we can use it for that.
Yeah, but whether we use it for those specific projects is a different story.
Right, but I'm just saying, if you want to get rid of the 60,000, we can get rid of the 60,000 and still fund some of these projects with the gas tax fund, right?
So you're suggesting reduce the 300,000 by 60,000?
If we're looking to take this down to a 2% tax increase, then yeah, we're going to have to shave somewhere, right? So, but again, I don't want it to cost the recreation park. I don't want it to cost the Friends of St. John or the Kingston Memorial Clinic or the Memorial Park or the Monument Park, right? So hopefully we can take some of that gas tax fund and 40 or 50,000 on these projects and use our gas tax fund to do it, but take it off our contribution funding list and shave this tax increase, right?
I guess what I want to
Okay.
say here is like, we've not agreed to any of those projects you've listed, right? So I'm just, I don't want you to get your hopes up, Sean, that all of those projects, that everybody who comes to council is gonna, if it's capital, we're gonna give them money through gas tax, or, you know what I mean? Like, I want to be clear about that, right? Is that's what we're talking about creating policy, would be that when these people come up, we would go through our criteria policy to determine whether or not we would recommend that they use our gas tax money, because it's also money that, as we've said, has been said by staff many times, we typically use for our own projects. So we don't want to give away all of the money for our projects and then have no money for our projects. Especially if we are not going to do a 4% increase, and we're going to do only 2, which means we're going to get rid of this landfill closure. We're going to need all the gas tax money we can get to close the landfill. The multiple landfills, right? So
And I think you're right. I think you're right, Mel. But in retrospect, it works out. It works out the same. It's just a matter of shifting money, whether we take the 60,000 off. I mean, we've allocated 110,000 or 104,000 to us this year. Was that the increase from
About 108.
108? So
Yeah.
It was 192.
Yeah, so we've allocated 108,000 to us anyway, whether we use the gas tax fund or not. So if we do use the gas tax fund, say 60,000 out of it, and I'm not saying allocate it to what Sean just mentioned. I'm saying if you were to take them off of the budget side and you've also reduced it by 60,000, which brings our number down because we already are allocating 108,000 to our own.
So what I would say is that the 60,500 in supplementary funding applications would give council the flexibility to use that money throughout the year. I think is where the warden was probably going. It was that for projects that had came up during the year that were of importance to council, whether they be tourism related or what have you, that 60,000 was a cushion to be able to fund some of those projects. Now, if you wipe that off of there and say we're just going to use the gas tax, it's not that simple. It's that you would now have to assess each individual project on a basis, number one, as to whether it qualifies for gas tax. Number two, staff are recommending that you make a policy in regards to, like Melanie saying, the criteria for getting access to that gas tax. And you also have to be mindful of the fact that if you start giving groups the impression out in the community that the gas tax is a free-for-all, and knowing that we have, potentially millions of dollars in there at any given time, just my opinion, but you may regret that decision at some point in time. Again, I'm not saying you can't go down that road. I'm just saying that the 60,000 was what I think someone referred to as a cushion of money to be able to fund important projects to you guys throughout the year. Now, if council is interested in doing all the projects that Councillor Sean Santon just mentioned, I guess you could say that 60,000 is gone. So again, I'm in the boat with Melanie, is that those projects were not approved and were not agreed on and aren't found anywhere in our budget beyond potentially from either A, 60,000, or B, gas tax on an individual application basis. If that makes any sense.
Right. Yeah, no, it does. I mean, we want to, we talked about wanting to be able to respond to strategic priorities throughout the year. The bottom line is we have a list of, requests that have come in the door. We've, made some decisions on those to the best of our ability, all, to be approved in the grander scheme of this budget, of course. But the bottom line is we're not going to know what, we're not going to know everything today or, before budget is approved. And so I'm a little concerned about removing that cushion. I think to your point, Sean, like if we could, if we could develop some strong policy that ensures that we are using gas tax money primarily for our, the municipalities' infrastructure priorities, but there could be some wiggle room there for projects that meet certain criteria, in addition to gas tax criteria, meet additional criteria that we would set, on a first come, first served. That's a possibility, right?
Right. And to Jason's point, you don't want to open that can of worms, but the reality is, Jason, there's people out there that know that can of worms is there, right? And they know that can of worms is available to them, right? So, and let's be honest, when you go to the gas station, you pay tax on your gas, and every resident in our county pays tax on their gas, right? So I'm sure that some of them would be okay with investing some of their taxes that they pay on fuel to tourism projects, recreation projects, stuff like that, right? So again,
I think actually, Councillor Sampson, the gas tax is misnamed because the source of those funds doesn't come from necessarily that particular taxation source. And they're looking at renaming it, I think, as part of their rollout this year. But I take your point. People pay federal and provincial tax, and and so this money comes from the federal government, and so to be used as investment for local projects, right? Yeah.
And I mean, I agree with you, Warden. I mean, maybe we don't get rid of that $60,000 cushion because, like you said, we don't want to approve this budget next month, and then groups come to us in September. And we got to say, well, we're going to put this to budget deliberations till the following March, right? You don't want to go down that road. So you want to have that cushion for sure, right? I know where you're coming from. And I mean, the projects that are before us right now with the Monument Park and the Recreation Park and whatever, that's not going to amount to $60,000. It might amount to $15,000, right?
Well, there's more than that on the list of requests that basically have not added to the budget.
Yeah, and again, I think that stuff that, regardless what's on the list, that like Melanie said, that's something that council has to sit down and approve or agree upon, whether it be the monument or whether it be anything else that we sit down and agree that we are going to participate in. In saying that, I think it still comes back to the fact that you know, we have a few dilemmas on how we're going to move the money and what our tax increase is going to be. Again, I'm going to speak for myself, and then we can move on and see how much that adjusts the pay scale. I'm still stuck on the 1%, the 1% and the 1%. I feel, a pay increase is better than no increase at all. So that's a 2% increase. And again, I know it's not obviously what anybody wanted. We've taken the same hit. We decided not to take our 1% increase right off the bat. And I feel again that we should take another one and refuse our $100, pump our $100 per month back into the funding. I don't care what we fund with it. At the end of the day, if it's $1,200 a year out of between the five of us, well then that's a $6,000. So I don't care if we give it to the really, I don't care if we give it to a food bank. I don't care if we do it for one of the projects that's on there. I just feel that everybody has to participate a little bit. And unfortunately, this year isn't like every other year. This year isn't that nobody deserves or doesn't deserve a merit increase of more than 4 or 5%. It's just that with the circumstances this year, it's just pretty hard. It's going to be a harder pill for the public to swallow that we did that much of an increase at the same time that we boosted up their taxes. So if at all possible, I'm just saying if we can get it down to 2%, then it's easier to show that we give a 2% increase to the staff. One, because they deserved it, and much more. However, it's an easier sell for a counselor to the public.
I don't really give a
My
crap if
district
it's an
anyway.
easier sell if it's whether it's the right move to do or not. I mean, maybe that's because I never really, I had a lot easier than others maybe because it was an easy election to win in my district considering what had happened here the last 4 years. But I just look at it as it was, I'm not worried about selling it if I think it's the right call.
Yeah, and I'm not worried about selling it either, Brent, because mine was an easy victory here as well. But in saying that, I guess it's not the selling feature, it's the justification. It's hard to justify a 4 to 5% increase at the same time you have to justify a 4 to 5 cent increase on the other side for somebody who lost money. That's where I'm going. It's just,
you're thinking of like, I guess when I'm hearing you speak, Councillor or Deputy Warden Digdon, it's, the perception of fairness by the public, right?
oh, 100%.
And what they are experiencing in their realities now. This has been a really hard year for everyone. Yeah.
Well, I think part of it too is the last few years, right? They probably shaved things almost to the bone, and whether that was right or wrong doesn't matter. This is the situation we're in now. I mean, they try to do everything they could to toe the line on taxes. So to think that it's not going to move at this point, I mean, I heard that from lots of people. They pretty well expected it was going to go up only because it had been so long that they knew it was basically overdue,
Right. Yeah, and I agree. And
it's
again,
bad timing. There's no doubt.
It's brutal timing, and it's brutal timing.
Timing.
It's brutal timing for everybody. Again, that's why I felt if we did a 2% this year and then next year we looked at it again, you know what, we might be doing a 2 or 4% again next year. We might even do the 5 rate across the board. I don't know how the structure set up. I just know that to do a 4 or 5 rate now is very it's very hard to to justify, not even to explain, just to justify. Considering that some people probably took a 4 or 5% loss in pay or lost their jobs completely.
Right. Okay.
And I'm okay with tipping in my $1,200 a year from my, the show. We've given back our 1%, and I'm okay with giving back our $100 a month for our internet fees. Again, we've had internet. I've had internet prior to the election, so if that helps, then I'm good with giving mine back.
Okay, so we've got a couple of options on the table. We're talking about, I guess I've heard 4 budget categories that one or more people are interested in being able to use to reduce the tax increase that's proposed in this current presentation of the budget. There was a savings on salary, savings on the capital reserve, or sorry, yes, the capital reserve, or was it the landfill one that you were looking at, Melanie? It was more the landfill one.
Well, that's really the only one. I mean, it's the only one of any consequence.
Because there's only 4. Yeah, exactly. And then the council reimbursement for internet or cell or whatever that is.
That's a
And
policy
then
though, I think, right? So that
it
might be a
is.
little trickier, yeah. And I mean, I think like Sean said, we can donate that within our district.
I just wanted to complete that thought, Councillor Sampson, because the 4 were the salary savings, the reserve, the capital reserve, the council fees, and then the other one was funding, the funding amount for organizations. So, so there's a lot of options within that. You know, if we looked at a little bit in each one of those, you know, and I think at this point, Deputy Warden Digdon, just because we're in May at this point, I think some of those stipends have already been paid out for council. So it would probably not quite be 6, maybe closer to 5. Yes. So. Okay, now sorry, Councillor Sampson, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to complete that thought. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And I mean, the thing is, hey, if we want to make tough decisions, there's also, you know, we talked about a 5-cent fire levy in Point Upper, and nobody seemed to want to hear about it, but that would raise over 40,000 in revenue, which, you know, that would generate a good chunk too. But if we don't have the heart to do that, then
Yeah, I don't think it's about hurt. I think we did. I think we mulled over that one to the bone last week when we already decided that and I'm only speaking for myself, but we decided prior to the meeting with the town of Port Hawkesbury that wasn't even going to enter.
I don't know that we ever decided, like as a group of 5. I mean, it might have been mentioned in those, you know, I don't recall that specifically, but
I can speak that we decided as a group of 5 to nominate the Councillor Melanie Sampson and the warden to speak on our behalf, as well as the CAO in the meeting. And before anything was to be agreed upon, was to bring it back to council. And I can say that it was brought back to council, that there was the agreement was the $60,000 and no increase in no input of a fire levy of any kind.
Yeah, and the thing is though, we got to get this out of our head about worrying about Port Hawkesbury though, because they don't care if we put the fire beyond or not. It's like we've got to. The first thing we're supposed to worry about is the county of Richmond, and not whether the town of Port Hawkesbury, you know, because they're not concerned about us. You know what I mean? We got to put Richmond residents first, and I mean it's
absolutely.
You know, and I'm fine with if you don't want to do it, but it's just that it's an unfair system in the sense that everybody else in the county, every other business, every other resident has to pay a fire levy, and we don't seem to want to even charge them half and 1/3 of the fire levy what most other residents are paying.
And I want to be clear, I never at any point said I actually said I was interested in a fire levy that included residential and commercial, but not industrial. Because that was the way my feeling was in terms of that conversation with Port Hawkesbury. And the warden may have a different recollection of that, but
that's what I remember as well.
My feeling when we met with them was that we were sort of trying to get them on our side to sort of protect that industrial base, right? That they would take what we were on. That's what made sense without us. And we didn't say we're not going to tax industrial, but we basically said we're going to do everything we can to protect that industrial tax base for everybody involved, for you guys and for us. We at no point ever really we almost never talked at all about the commercial or the residential, like really, because it's inconsequential. Like what they care about is making sure the industrial base stays, and that's what we use sort of in that negotiation piece. So you know, when we talked about this, as all the times we talked about it, I never ever said I was not interested in a residential and commercial. In fact, I think what I said was I would propose that we do 10% on the 2 of them. It's not a lot of money, but it's something. And if we're talking about, cutting people's merit, then we're not talking about, we're not talking about a lot of money here. But anyway, for me, I am supportive of commercial and residential fire levy.
That is what we discussed, yeah. Okay, so so then we've got, I guess, some decisions to make. I know there are some other, we wanted to get into the water sewer discussion this evening, but I also don't want to rush this because it is a big decision. So maybe at this point I could ask, is there an interest, I guess, by the majority in trying to make some moves to get us closer to a 2-cent tax increase as opposed to a 4-cent tax increase by cutting from the already pretty lean budget that we're presented with? Maybe I'll start with, go ahead.
For me, Warden, yeah, I mean, if we could get closer to 2.5, I think it would make me feel a whole lot better when it comes to, again, looking at my district, and 67% of those people can't afford it. They're going to have no choice, but they're going to have to take from someone or something in their family to make up for this loss, right? So for me, if we can get it closer to 2.5, I'd be happy with that. Yes.
Okay. Melon,
I would say maybe even if we meet in the middle at 3, we could look at that. I mean, everybody seemed not too bad with 4, but I don't know if everybody got a little scared of the electric in the last week or what.
Well, for me, Brent, I always crunch numbers, and I was fine with it. And I'm saying to myself, well, it's only $162 a year, and it's only, whatever, $3 a week. It's a coffee, right? But when you divide 2,000 into 2162.50 on a $250,000 assessment, then it's now 8%. It's not $3.13 a week, right? And no one on a fixed income is getting an 8% increase, right? Anytime soon, right? I mean, I got people in my district that's getting letters from the federal government saying their pension's going up by $1.48. You know what I mean? It's an insult, is what it is, right? And we're gonna put their increase up by 8%, right? It's just, to me, it's a concern for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we got to realize too that, I think we're in for some inflation here. The cost of a lot of things are increasing dramatically, and it's not that we're trying to pile on. It's just that I think most, level-headed people would understand that, our costs are increasing on a lot of this stuff too. And if we want to, try and put some more aside for the future for infrastructure and things like that, I mean, you got to bite the bullet at some point. I don't know if any, it's.
I don't know. I mean,
this wasn't meant to be easy.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Brent, I've always said if a politician wanted to impress me, that he would put something on the table to say, okay, from January 1st of one year to December 31st of the same year, inflation went up 4%. Well, guess what? Everything's going up across the board 4%. So that way, no one's falling behind, right? I always said, that's the way it should be, but unfortunately, that's not the way it is, right? And it's never going to be that way, right?
Yeah.
No, yeah, and I understand what you're saying. It's just we have no. It's almost, we have no way of controlling that. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not.
Right.
It's
Right.
out of our scope.
So, Councillor Melanie Sampson, in terms of your comfort level with a 4 cent, we've heard Councillor Sampson 3 cent, Councillor Sampson 2 cents.
I'm fine with 4. I just mean if we have to whittle it down to 3, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I have no problem
Yeah, okay.
with 4.
Okay. Yeah.
Melanie's crunching numbers.
She's crunching numbers. It's okay. I can go to Deputy Warden Digdon. I mean, obviously, we'd all like the tax rate increase to be 0. Let's just make that perfectly clear right now. Right?
Yeah.
But that's not our reality. So, Deputy Warden.
Yeah, so I guess before I would even look at the numbers, I would personally, I think I'm going to take my phone a friend. I'm going to ask. I want to reach out to our CAO or to our CFO and ask them what they think. If they were sitting in our position today, what would be, and looking at the numbers, what they think would be an appropriate increase. I'm not saying that's what I'm going with. I'm just going to say with the years of experience the two of them have, I would just like to know what their thought is.
You want to go first, Don?
Sure. I'll make a few comments. Lots to digest for sure. Considering that no tax rate increases happened over the last several years, I mean, if they had of these folks would be paying that kind of money to begin with, for every $100,000 of assessment, a person will pay $10 a year on a 1 cent increase. If you take that and divide that by 12, you got less than $1 a month. So a lot of people out there that can afford a 1 cent, 2 cent, 3 cent increase are likely higher assessed. It's very unlikely that a lot of the fixed income folks, have a $300,000 assessment. And if they do, well, maybe they can't afford their $300,000 house. So I think that a person that has a $300,000 home can certainly, can afford to pay $30 a year on a cent. So that's one point I wanted to make. The other point I wanted to make was, with respect to the merits and the staff and reducing that to 1%, I think you do a great injustice to the staff because obviously they did make that effort last year. They did accept it. They did understand that there was a big loss, and the loss wasn't 900,000 last year. It was 400 and some thousand last year and 400 and some thousand the year before. So, with all the efforts that these staff have made, because keep in mind, this pandemic has been going on for over a year. So, I mean, we have a lot of staff that stepped up to the plate, a lot of immunocompromised families. And these staff still went out there and did their job, as Chris mentioned, water and sewer, essential services, people in the office, etc. So, yeah, I think it's a possibility that there may be some issues there. I think there's other places that we can find some savings that we could, easily get it down to 3 cents. As far as getting it down to 2 cents, that might be a little tougher.
I agree.
So I don't know. I think if Jason wants to add to that, he can go ahead. If he has any other comments to make, that's fine.
Yeah, so I would just add that keep in mind, when we look at the tax rate and we look at people who make more money than less money, I guess from a staff perspective, we don't necessarily just look at it that way. I think we don't have the current data, but we know that, in approximately around 2013, 2014, that AMANS had did a survey, I guess, of tax rate across the province. And at that time, I believe Richmond was one of the 3 lowest municipalities across the whole entire province. So to add to Don's point about had the tax rate been increased over the last 10 years, let's just say, people would be paying more and they would have paid more for all those years in the past. And then additionally, we always look at what are people paying compared to market. So the answer is that our tax rate, I think we can all agree, should be probably a lot higher than what it is today. So staff are in mind, even though when we think about it, if we're recommending a tax rate increase, we're recommending taxing ourselves because we're property owners in Richmond County. But we're looking at a much bigger global perspective is when you look at the amount of reserves, when you look at the infrastructure deficit, when you look at the liabilities we have coming down the pipe in 5 and 10 and 15 and 20 years time, 1 cent and 2 cent increase is a drop in the bucket. Is a drop in the bucket in the overall picture. Now, okay, I understand is 4 high for you guys' first year being in. I agree, 3 is a lot easier to get to, and we could just simply reduce the transfer to landfill closure reserve and the capital reserve. And then everybody kind of wins, and we have a 3 cent tax rate increase. Getting to 1 or 2 cents is a lot more difficult. Is going to put a lot more pressure. And really all you're doing is deferring the decision to next year. If you go with a 3 or 4 this year, then you may be more in a position next year to say, okay, we can get away with 1 or 2, or maybe we can get away with none. So that's all.
What if we, if we were to reduce the landfill closure somewhere to the range of 100,000? I know it's 57,071 it's showing right in front of us now, but we'll say 60,000 just for an even number. And this 60,000 that we put in the And those contributions, those funding contributions, you know, we have about 60,000 there that's sort of, it's not specifically earmarked for specific projects. You know what I mean? It's a general amount that we want to have available to us for, you know, great projects that come up during the year. So what if that were reduced in half to 30,000 and we dropped this by roughly 60, and, you know, that would get us down 1 cent.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Sampson. I just want to circle back to Deputy Warden. You had kind of deferred your answer there, and I don't know if that changes your, you know, we don't have to.
And it does, and that's why, honestly, maybe that's why they make the big bucks, so that they can give me the right information. And thanks, Dawn, and thanks, Jason, because again, I was sitting down at the 2 cents, and with the explanation on both sides, you know, for the salary, and with the explanation on the increase. I would like to, yeah, I'd love to see 2, but I think 3 is more acceptable.
Okay. Councillor Melanie Sampson, did you want to provide a comment on that? And I'm not backing anyone into a corner here. Provide comment if you so wish, and just want to be able to provide some instruction to staff to help us along here, right?
Yeah, I'm in no corner at all. I just like to do my numbers, and then I did a little, I want you to do a search, I certainly think that, when the town of Port Hawkesbury puts out a big press release today going on about how they're not having tax increases and all of that, it does put a little bit more pressure. Certainly when I read that this morning, I was like, man, that puts some pressure on us. It doesn't make us look good to put 4 cents, blah, blah, blah. So that was in the back of my mind. Am I comfortable with 4 cents? Yes. Do I recognize that people will get very upset about it? Yes. My thought process is probably similar to Dawn's, in that, most people that we're talking about who are on fixed incomes, that are just on CPP or OAS or whatever, they probably are not living in houses that have $200,000 or $300,000 assessments, right? Their assessments are probably $150, and if you even took 150, and I'm still not sure, Sean, where you are getting the 8%. So I'm just not sure about that. But I'm using 6.4. That's what I see when I look at Jason's numbers, is increased budget. So that's $97 a year. And I recognize that that's, 97, that's $8 a month, as you would do it, the $2 a week. And I get it that, they're looking at it in their monthly budget or whatever. Okay, so all of that said, right, I was comfortable with the 4 cents when we started. I still am comfortable with that. Obviously, it's better if we're doing less than that from a political perspective. Here we go. I did it for you, Jason. I said we're the politicians. So if we do some fancy work to get ourselves to 3 or 2.5 or whatever, I'm going to support that. I'm not going to not support that. I will tell you, the fancy work, if it includes the merit decreases, I'm not happy with that. So to me, that would, maybe we need to have that conversation separately. But so do I support adjusting reserves to make that work? Yeah. Do I support adjusting merit increases or CPI? No.
So, very quickly, a 1 cent tax rate increase or decrease, it impacts by about 90,000 according to the numbers that the CFOs have provided. And so if we did, very easily a reduction in that capital reserve of 85,000, and then a reduction in maybe the council stipend of 5,000, that would cover it. That would be our 3 cent target. It's simple. It's I think it's a show of good faith that that we're including ourselves in that.
So, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Deputy Warden.
I just had one question, and I don't have it broken down in front of me. The 4, I'm okay. I shouldn't say it this way, but had we included I know we talked before about the each district getting a percentage that they could use to work within their district. Is that included in their? Well,
it's included in that overall funding, and how we distribute that is to be determined, right? That 300,000.
Yeah, I guess we just
Right.
haven't come to a conclusion on that one yet, Mike, as to how
Yeah.
that's gonna work.
Yeah.
So that was
Yeah.
just trying to put
Allocated
aside a
mechanism.
certain amount.
Yeah,
How much
the
have we
mechanism of
allocated
how,
for that?
sorry.
Was
what
it,
that,
no, how much
Davina?
was it, what did we allocated for that, that process?
So we increased that budget line by 108,000.
Yeah.
And we decided on the amount, and we did not decide on the method. So it's up to us from a policy perspective to decide how we're going to distribute that. There is a grant funding policy in place.
Yep.
We can use that for the time being because it does exist until such time as we have a different policy in place, or we may decide we like that one. So the mechanism, that method is just not determined yet.
Okay. So I guess in conclusion for me, I'm good either way, I guess, with the 3 cents or if the 4 cents allows us to use the old style where we can help out somebody in our district, then I'm okay with the 4 cent. If not, then I'm okay. If we got to stick to the, I guess, and I mean that, I know that's something that we have to do in I guess, budget deliberations or whether it be, or not budget, whether it be, council decision on how we're going to distribute the money. But if we go back to I want to say the old system that they used to have in place where the councillor could work within his district, then I'm okay with the 4 cent, because then I can show the people in the whatever in my district that that's what we're working with. If not, then I would be good with the 3 cents as well.
So we just don't have a guarantee on that, Deputy Warden, and we won't this evening, because that's going to be a policy decision. I guess that's the bottom line on that one.
Okay.
It would depend on the opinion of the majority of councillors whenever that item hits the agenda on policy and bylaw.
Yeah, but
So-
I know where Deputy Digdon is going with
Yeah.
that situation, and that was important to. I don't know about your district and everybody else's district, but it was important to mine with this district fund. And
Yeah.
again, going to the Kingston Memorial Clinic, asking us for 3,000. When we first got elected, people were impressed that we solved the food bank situation in about 5 minutes, right? So if we had a district fund where we can give $600 each to the Dr. Kingston Memorial Clinic to give them $3,000 for a month, how good would that look to all the residents of Richmond County, right? When we're investing our district funds and helping all of Richmond County, right? I think, like Mike says, if it goes from 3 to 4%, that would be easily justified to someone when they see this district fund getting invested in the entire county.
Yeah. Point well taken for sure, Councillor Sampson. I'm sorry, I'm just taking some notes here. Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, if I may jump in, Warden, I just want to say also to kind of support the tax rate increase point. I won't reveal who my sources are, but one of my seasoned sources basically is informing me that, which I was aware of, but I just didn't think to bring it up, but the seniors tax property rebate is in effect, which you guys may be aware of. And for people who are on the guaranteed supplement, the low income seniors, they're basically eligible for half of their property tax rebate and sewer of up to $800. So any increase that you would have would only be really 50% increase. So if you increase 4 cents, the taxpayer would only have to pay 2 if they were eligible for that supplement. I wanted to bring that up.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay. So thanks a lot for your comments on that. So it sounds like, we could live with a 4, depending on if we had some flexibility there. But 3 would be better. And like I said, 0 would be best in terms of the increase in cents for our tax rate. I guess I'll go back to the suggestion of, the reserve. So Jason, that landfill is at 157 now. If we reduce that, like I said, by 85, I think we're still in better shape than has happened in, well, maybe not, actually. It was
No, yeah,
81
that'd be worse off,
budgeted for
yeah.
that last year.
That's
So
where I
we-
was thinking 60,000 maybe for that, and 30,000 out of the extra 60 we had put in the original list there, the funding contributions. And I mean, obviously we want to bring that up over time, but maybe it would give us some leeway this year, and we could look at it
Yeah.
again next year.
So you have the two amounts. We have the landfill closure, which you're seeing on your screen. That one was brought down to 157. But if you brought that down, if you look at, you wipe this 40,000 out altogether, which was the transfer to reserve, you can basically wipe that to zero, and it would give you 40,000. And then if you go back to the landfill closure, you could bring that down by the difference of the 9506 and the 40,000 to balance it at a 3 cent. It's that simple if you wanted to take that approach.
Yeah, and that was your point, Jason, regarding putting money in a reserve and then taking money out of a reserve, like just to kind of, eliminate that. Yeah.
You know, if you want to keep this landfill closure up high, you could basically drop it to just over 100,000, and then it appears that way that council put more money into reserve to get that project done at some point, and then we would just wipe 40 here and zero, and that would be fine to bring it down to a cent if everybody can live with that.
Okay. So that gives us a good target. You know, it's not lost on me though, Deputy Warden Digdon, your point about, sharing in the hit, and certainly I'd be in agreement with saving $5,000 on those types of stipends if others are. Otherwise, we are looking to recover reserve, to those funds out of reserve and potentially our funding. But it sounds like to me you've made a pretty strong case for being able to justify a tax rate increase based on being able to invest in projects locally. So it's a balancing act. So my suggestion is that we would reduce the operational reserve by 40,000, reduce the landfill capital reserve there by 45, and then have a reduction of the councillor's expenses of $5,000. Because that would be about what you're talking about, Deputy Warden Digdon, and that would recover 90,000, which would bring us down to that 3 cent tax rate increase. And to me, I will just say, whatever we decide here this evening, it's less about a sell and more about trying to be as fair as possible to the taxpayers, recognizing they voted for change, but also recognizing that we've got some people who are in some, some pretty tight financial circumstances in this county. So
Right. So, and I want to make it perfectly clear that I hope nobody or anybody at staff feels that I'm trying to take money out of their pocket or that they're not deserving. That's by far the first thing from my mind. It's as well I am from our perspective when I voted, that I didn't believe that at this was a good year for us to take our 1%. So again, it's not about feeling if it was, I guess it is up to me, but if it was my money I was playing with, then I guess I would be more than happy to give them the 5% or 4%, whatever is adequate. I find it very concerning that, and obviously anybody that's in this seat would also find it very concerning that we're going with the full stipend and the full merit increase, and we're still going at a 3 or 4% increase to the public. I guess that's my only concern.
Gordon, could I
That
suggest
increase is not to everybody though, Mike. That's not
Yeah.
just across the board. That was people that were due for this, right?
But
The thing about the technology thing, I don't know, maybe we could look at that in the sense, and I know it's in a policy thing, like would it make sense to do that for this 1 year, especially considering, what's going on with COVID and so on? That would be maybe a good gesture, right? Like, I don't know if there's how that works.
what technology thing? What is that?
The $100.
Oh yeah, sorry, yes, okay, yeah.
So
Sorry, I
maybe,
consider it
maybe it does make
universal
sense to do it for
universal.
just do it as a 1 year for this calendar year or whatever, you know what I mean? Like considering we're trying to ease this. I mean, there's going to be more tax increases in the future. There's no doubt. We got to, whether we like it or not, it's going to happen if we want anything to be done around here. But I mean, I think maybe Mike's point, maybe that would be a good gesture to say, yeah, well, we're trying to tighten our belt a little bit as well,
So I guess part of my point is if us taking that $100 hit leaves them at their 4%, I'm okay with doing that, or whatever.
Well, it's not
And
really
I
much of
think
it.
that
It's just, to be honest,
I'm just going to
it's a show
interject
thing,
Councillor
I think, but-
Sampson, because I think Councillor Melanie has been trying to make a comment there. Sorry, Melanie, I apologize.
I think
It's
we're
really
going,
hard on Zoom.
I know. I think that we're just going around in circles about the same things over and over again.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
feel like we've got several areas where we can, like, we all agree that the balancing part to this is the landfill closure costs. So my suggestion is that because we definitely don't agree on certain things. So my suggestion is that we vote on giving up our $100 a month for this fiscal. Then we vote on whether or not we're giving the merit increases or not, or some other format of that. That we then vote on, whether or not we adjust our funding, thing, if we adjust that down. So like, I just feel like and I appreciate it, that you're trying to present a total package that we would either approve collectively or not. And I don't know that we're going to get to that. I don't know that we're going to get there. So I almost feel like we have differing opinion. We all are of the same opinion that we'd like to get to the 3. We have different views about how we get to that. And I feel like to wrap this little, because we're talking about the same things over and over again.
Yeah, for sure. So
I mean, let me be clear, guys. I'm uncomfortable with the fact that I got someone's wage increase in my hands. You know what I mean? I'm uncomfortable with that, right? And Chris, if I offended you that was never my intention, Chris. Like you say, when Public Works is out there fixing a water main break and they're into their eyeballs in mud and water and whatever, it was never my intention to insult anybody or whatever, right? I'm just trying my best here to try to soften the blow for a taxpayer, right? I know, Melanie, you went back and you said, and to the CEO's point, he said about the 150 to 300,000. The people that can afford a $300,000 assessment can afford a tax increase compared to the 100 or 150. But guess what? The people that are living in a $100,000, $150,000 assessed home, the windows are older, the doors are older, the roof is older, the oil truck is there twice as often as what they are when it comes to a $300,000 home. So their expenses to maintain that $150,000 home is just as bad, right? So it's not a win. I'm just trying to soften the blow for everybody involved. Right?
Yeah, for sure. But I think Councillor Sampson, that's a really good strategy. Maybe what I'll do is I'll just get some consensus, or I guess I'll check in with each councillor on salary, the merit increase, which came to a $48,000 budget line item. And please correct me if I'm wrong there, anyone, but that was my recollection. I don't see it on the screen, but
48.5.
That's what it is, yeah. 48.
Thank you, yeah. So Councillor Melanie Sampson, would you vote to keep that in the budget?
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Brent Sampson?
Yes.
Would you vote to keep that in? Okay. Councillor Sean Sampson?
For me, if we can get it below 4 cents, I'd be able to justify that.
Okay.
Anywhere's below, 4 or higher,
Okay.
I have a hard time swallowing it for sure.
Okay. Thank you. So, Deputy Warden?
Yeah, I'm gonna say I'm gonna have to take the same medication that Councillor Sean had. If we can get it under 4 cents, then I'm okay with that. But if not, then I think it's something that has to be looked at.
Okay. And for my part, I'm on exactly the same page. I think I'd really like to maintain that employee merit increase if we can. But if we, this is a bit of a jump in terms of the tax rate increase compared to what people are used to. So I'd like to see us get to 3 if that's the case. So the next one I'll go to is our funding. So we did increase that to 300,000. Councillor Melanie Sampson, would you prefer to leave it as is?
Yes.
Okay, and I guess when I'm asking these questions, just as context, this will probably most likely fall back to that capital reserve or those final two items.
Right.
Okay, so that's what I'm going through. Councillor Brent Sampson.
Yeah, I don't mind dropping it a bit, like even if we were to drop it somewhat. If I have no problem with dropping some of those funding contributions if that gets us to 3, in the same way you guys talked about the merit increase.
Okay. Okay. So the next one would be the council stipend. Oh, sorry. I'm missing counselor. Councillor Sean Sampson. I had you ahead of me.
Yeah, no, yeah, I mean, I'm all right with leaving it there, and if we have to drop it a little bit, like Brent Sampson said, I'm okay with that as well. Again, as long as we can find, ways to fund some of this stuff, and like Councillor Melanie said, it's not that want 100% of my projects 100% committed to. We can roll the dice here and we can shovel some stuff, but yeah, if we can, look at gas tax, if we can look at policies, if we can look at funding in the future, then yeah, I'm okay with where it is.
Okay, and Deputy Warden?
Yeah, I guess I'm on the same page as Brent for that. If we can, if we have to drop it a little from the top side to balance it on the bottom, then so be it. But I think we got it narrowed down pretty close to where we want to be right now.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to jump to the council stipends next for the, I guess it's not the stipends, but it's the expense reimbursement. I thought was for, I guess it's more than just internet. Maybe it's technology in general, that $100. So would Councillor Melanie Sampson, would you agree to reducing that by $5,000?
Yep.
Okay. Councillor Brent Sampson?
Yeah, I think for this year, it shows a good sign that we're trying to do our part as well, right?
Agreed. Councillor Sean Sampson?
Yeah, well, I was giving it away anyway to fund projects or fund, groups or whatever, right? So yeah, I have no problems taking that away.
Okay, and Deputy Warden?
Yeah, I was giving mine away to constituents, whether it be via card or whatever else. So again, there will be constituents do without it, but at the same time, it'll save. It's 5,000 that we can add on. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, so it sounds like we've got some general agreement on most of those. The operational reserve. So the suggestion is. So basically, just I guess to give us a summary of where we're at right now, we've got. As long as we can get to 3 cents, we've got salary merit increases maintained at the 4%. So 0 decrease there. We've got 0 decrease on the funding and a $5,000 decrease on council technology reimbursement thing. So we're at the operational reserve at this point. So this is the $40,000 that the CFO was talking about, that Jason was speaking about. Does it make sense to kind of put money in there when we're taking money out for specific projects? So are we okay with reducing that by 40,000? Councillor Melanie Sampson?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it brings it to 0. Okay. Councillor Brent Sampson?
Yeah, okay. I guess we can, yeah.
Okay. Councillor Johnson?
Well, no, but I mean, we've sat here and complained. I mean, Amanda, you've done it enough times about the last group saying, oh, well, they didn't put stuff aside, and then here we're kind of doing the same thing. Mind you, I will grant it, this is a bit of a different situation this year, right? But,
yeah, it is. Absolutely. Tough pill to swallow. You're right.
I didn't mean to laugh at you, Brent. I was kind of laughing with you.
Councillor Sean Sampson?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Yep.
Okay, and Deputy Warden?
I'm totally against it now. Brent laughed. I don't like it anymore. Yeah, I know. Again, I think it's definitely going to be a year-by-year struggle, and all we can do is get by this one and then learn from the people in the administration that guide us along, and then next year we'll have a better handle on what we need to do and where we need to be at.
That's right. So we've got a reduction so far then, as long as we can get to the 3 cents, we've got a reduction so far of 40,000 plus 5,000, so 45,000, which gets us halfway to the 90, which means that our capital landfill reserve fund would be reduced by $45,000, which would still keep it up over 100,000. Councillor, that would get us to the $90,000 to get us to that 3-cent mark. Councillor Melanie Sampson.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Brent Sampson.
Sure.
Okay, Councillor Sean Sampson.
Good, yep.
And Deputy Warden.
Yep.
Okay.
And Warden Marburkett.
All right. And me, yes, I agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. No one's
Yeah.
asking you, Warden Marburkett.
You're right. You're right, and I'm forgetting to comment. I guess you'd hear my comment if I didn't agree.
There you go.
So we've got a 45,000 reduction of the capital reserve for landfills by 45,000, an operational reserve reduction by 40,000, and a reduction in council reimbursements of $5,000. So that takes us to the 90,000. So I guess at this point, we could, provide instruction to staff to make those adjustments to the budget. And
So,
once, yeah.
excuse me, before we provide instructions for them to make the adjustments, I know staff's on here looking over it as well. Is there anything that we're looking at wrong or doing wrong, or that you would recommend prior to us agreeing to this? Or again, I don't know whose ballpark it falls in, whether it be CAO or CFO or, Chris or whatever, but is there, what are your guys' thoughts, please?
I'll talk about the technology allowance policy first.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have to repeal that one. Because the $100 a month for each counselor is through a policy. We could already pay the first month of the fiscal, so
That's what I thought.
we're looking at basically 5,500 would be the remainder of the year. And we could likely repeal that before the end of this month if that's something that you wish to do. So that amount could be as high as 5,500.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any
Yeah, I
comments?
mean,
Now, CEO, is that policy in place simply for counselors, or is that counselor and staff?
No, that's a council policy.
Okay,
Only.
so so it's not affecting staff at all. Like, you
No
know,
staff get reimbursed for internet.
Okay, good. No, good, you don't get reimbursed. Good that it's not affecting anybody else, but.
we just get our phones paid. Michael, what I will just say is that, understanding that you guys are all new and this has been, maybe not your first budgeting process, but I guess your first municipal government budgeting process, you're doing exactly what you guys should be doing. I mean, it's fine and dandy to campaign and be elected and whatever, but when you get to this point, this is where difficult decisions have to be made. This is where Sean's bringing up points about how it affects, the general person or the person on low income. They're not easy things to talk about. And at the end of the day, there's always pressures on the tax rate. And we could always be putting more money aside. I guess it's staff's job to recommend, and it's you guys' job to decide, what that final budget looks like. But yeah, I would say we're talking about the areas that we're talking about. And if we're gaining consensus tonight, then we're making progress.
I appreciate you saying that, Jason. I appreciate you recognizing my concerns in that. And again, when we first started this process, and I'll use the words again, we all have a wish list, right? And if we can all obtain our wish list and soften the blow to the taxpayer, then everybody wins, right? Or comes close to winning anyway, right? So.
Yep. And it's really about,
Yeah.
it's really about, letting the numbers guide you, but then, so the numbers tell a story, but then your constituents tell a story, and you're elected to represent, and we understand that being pulled in all different types of directions, and the end game is really just to make the best decision we can, and be able to argue that we're moving forward, we're doing things that we're supposed to be doing, maybe not putting as much aside, maybe not making as much progress as we'd like, but every year, if we're making a step forward, then that's all you can ask for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to your point, Jason, this is absolutely a long game. And, I would agree. I feel like a slight miracle that we've gotten as much progress on this budget done as we have, considering we're all new and considering we were starting off with an extra $100,000 in mandatory costs burdening our budget from other sources. So I'm really pleased with this progress. So does that provide staff then, Don or Jason or both, with enough sort of feedback to go back and create another draft based on what we've talked about tonight, or do you need anything else from us?
No, I think that's it. Those few changes that basically we gained consensus on tonight, we'll revise, and then what we can do is we can email out council one more draft of the operating budget, the capital budget, the funding contribution list, and then of course we would plan to at some point bring the operating budget forward for council's approval to our formality. We do a memo to the CAO for the area rates, for the operating budget, for the capital budget. And then basically we need specific motions to approve the budget.
Okay, that's great. So I think we're good. So that, I guess, will conclude the discussion on our on this section of our budget costs. I think it's 10 to 8. We still have some time. Jason or Don, I think one of you had mentioned, I apologize if I'm forgetting who, about the discussion on the sewer and other portions. So do we want to proceed with that now? Are we prepared to do that?
I think we could do the water, Jason.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think the water's going to take long.
The water is pretty straightforward, so we're going to let Chris talk for a change, so he doesn't say enough usually. So you want to share your screen, Chris? Bring it up.
Let's see. The copy I'm going to bring up likely isn't very clean.
Okay, so if you want, I can bring it up. Just give me a sec here.
Actually, I might be able to get the one I emailed you earlier.
Okay. It would be easier because then you could move down it on your own. That way I could step out for a minute, but let's see here. I can just make him the co-host, right, Yvonne?
Okay, I've got it here.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, Chris, I think you're the co-host now, so. All right.
Anything?
Yeah, I can see it.
Oh, great. Okay, so this is the first time we've presented the water budget like this. So what I'll say, I guess, before we start, some of you may have to mute your mics. I think I'm getting feedback of myself talking.
Sure.
Yeah, so the water budget, basically the rates would have been set during a rate hearing with the UARB a number of years ago. So despite what we see on the budget, whether there's a shortfall or not, this doesn't impact the water rates at present. I'll just mention that as we start out here. So if we start at the top, water's broken out, the expenses are broken out into a number of cost categories, and that's the way that the NSUARB requires that we report. So the first category is power and pumping. And line 107 is power and fuel for the Arichat water system. That would be the plant and any ancillary systems like the water tower. The budget last year was $39,000. We're projecting $46,000, and we're looking at increasing that line item to $46,000 in the present year. The next item is maintenance structure in Arichat. That would be, excuse me for 1 second. So that would be the structure is proper and not the treatment equipment. So we have that budgeted at $10,600 last year. We're looking at increasing it to $15,600 despite the fact the projection was lower. And the reason for that proposed increase is to allow $5,000 for some upgrades for essentially a laboratory in the water treatment plant. Presently, they're using the sink in the kitchenette, which is not really appropriate for lab work, especially when they're eating in that area. The next item is maintenance, power and pump in Arichat. That would be basically for the treatment equipment itself. 19,400 was budgeted last year. This year we're looking at 29,400. And in that figure, there's $10,000 budgeted for new PCs and SCADA upgrades. The control system, the supervisory control and data acquisition system is quite dated. It lacks a lot of features, and at this point we only have one computer with no backup because of issues we've had. So 10,000 of that increase is for that work. The next line item is Louisdale and Evanston Power and Fuel. So similar to above, that would be for heat and electricity for the system. It was budgeted at 15,000 last year. We're budgeting 30,000 this present year, and that increase is just strictly based on the projection and also the number in years past. So that number's been climbing. There's nothing new in there. Maintenance structure, Louisdale and Evanston. So similar, that would be for the non-treatment equipment if we had to do maintenance on the building, which is actually new now, and the water towers, for example. So $1,000 budgeted last year, looking at increasing that to $5,000 this year, and that's, although the projection is quite low, we do anticipate some additional expenditures there. Maintenance, power and pump, Louisdale. That would be for the treatment equipment, budgeted $5,000 last year. Projection was quite close, and we're budgeting $11,500 in the coming year, and in that number, we've included $6,500 for a new chlorine residual analyzer for the Evanston water tower. That equipment's antiquated and no longer reliable. So we've done all the others in the last 2 years. This is the last one remaining. And the next line item, special assessment, you'll see that in the other cost centers as well. And if you recall, we talked about an amount of money that was transferred from the sewer budget, transferred to the water utility. So what we're doing is distributing that amount of money amongst these different cost centers. So you'll see here it's 11,670, and that's based on an estimate of where those resources are being spent. And the total for reference was $233,398. So all of these line items will add up to that $233,398. The next category is water treatment. So that's basically treatment chemicals. Well, for the most part, it is treatment chemicals. So supplies and expenses for Arichat, $55,000 budgeted, came in just over 55, and we're maintaining that budget line item for the coming year. On the Louisdale side, budgeted at 30, it came in at just over 23,000, and we're dropping that budgeted line item to 25,000 for the coming year. The special assessment in this case, this is the first year we break up that assessment over the different cost centers. So you'll see the budget was 0 for last year, but in the coming year, you'll see that there's an increase. So in this case, it was 0 last year. We're budgeting 105,000 for this coming year. The next category is transmission and distribution. So under maintenance of services for Arichat Petit de Gras was 19,500 last year, and we're holding that budget for the coming year. The next item is maintenance of services Louisdale Evanston, again 22.5 last year, and despite the fact the projection is higher, we're maintaining 22.5 because prior to last year the number was still in line with that budget. Next item is maintenance of hydrants. Budgeted at 10,000 last year. We spent just a shade over that, and budgeting 10,000 again this year. Maintenance of mains, budgeted 20,000 last year, came in closer to 30, so we're budgeting 30,000 for the coming year. Many water main breaks we have, that's generally where it ends up, and over the last few years that number's been creeping up, so the 20,000 is no longer realistic, but it could fluctuate greatly from year to year depending on the number of breaks. Next item is maintenance of other distribution plants. Historically, I think that was used for snow removal expenses. Hasn't been anything in there. There's nothing in the projection, so we're proposing putting it at 0 for the coming fiscal year. Maintenance of meters is the next one, and that's essentially replacing water meters that are beyond end of life or that stopped working. Budgeted at $10,000 last year. It's only $1,844 spent. We didn't order any replacement meters this, or I should say last fiscal, and we're budgeting $10,000 for the coming fiscal. And again, that's basically for the purchase of water meters.
Chris, could I just ask a quick question on that?
Yep, anytime.
Okay, so just, that seems like a big difference there. Is it just because like there's not really any way to tell how many meters you'd need to have in a certain year? And sorry for my ignorance on this, but I know very little about
We
municipal
still
water
had some
systems.
inventory on hand, and we
Okay.
didn't get as many in as in past years because of the COVID restrictions and not wanting to go in people's homes.
Okay, of course, yeah.
So
Okay.
next year we do plan on doing more, so that'll we should spend it next year. We'll just order some more meters.
Okay, thank
Chris, I
And
think,
again, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, Chris, I think Brent wanted you to add to line 125. I think Brent wanted you to put a slash there and put dry hydrants.
Those would get paid for through the operating budget and not the water utility.
I'm just joking, Chris. I'm
we
poking
can
fun at
try.
Brent. I'm just poking fun at Brent and Mike, that's all.
And he says it when my mic is muted, eh?
Gotta be quick on the draw. So special assessment. So this is where in past years that entire amount was put in. So last year it was 226,600, increased by 3% year over year. Now, while it looks like there's less on that line item, the remainder of the line items add up to 3% more than that 226,600. So that allotment will be down to 70,000 under transmission and distribution. And if we go down to admin in general, bad debts expense budgeted at 500, budgeting 500 again this coming year. Regulatory expenses 2,000 budgeted, 2,000 again this year. That's essentially operating approvals and water withdrawal approvals. There's an expense to renew those. Insurance 21,000 last year, same for this year. Professional fees, audits, ads, etc. So that was budgeted 5,000 last year, and that's what we're forecasting. We're proposing 15,000 for the coming year, and in that number is the fee for the rate study. So that $10,000 increase would just be a one-time increase for that study. Other interest charges, 0 last year, budgeted 0 this year as well. There's a small amount in there in the projection. Office supplies budgeted 3,000, came in just under 3,500. We're budgeting 3,000 again for the coming year. Miscellaneous budgeted 1,500, came in closer to 2,500, and historically the last number of years it's been higher than budgeted. So we're bumping that one up to 2,500. Water testing cost was budgeted 30,000. We're holding the line on that one. And the special assessment under admin in general would have been 0 last year. This year is 46,680. And the last 2 items, there's a depreciation expense. So this is an amount that has to be put aside. It's mandated by the UARB. It's calculated through the handbook, and that contribution last year would have been 94,000 budgeted. It's a little higher because we did do some capital work that changed the amount of depreciation that had to be transferred. And for the coming year, we're showing it at 100,000, but we still have some work to do on that calculation as a result of the new plant in Moosdale. And the last item is non-operating expenditures, the capital expense out of revenue. That was budgeted at 30,000 last year. The reason we're showing a projection of 80,000 is because of the Arichat Water Treatment Plant project that was just finished at the end of the fiscal year. So that project ideally would have come out of the depreciation fund, but the depreciation fund was depleted from the water treatment plant that was done, commissioned a couple of years ago now. So that amount of money is showing under the capital expense out of revenue rather than the depreciation fund, which is where it would normally come out of. And in the coming year, we're budgeting 105,000, and the reason for that, there are 3 items included. One is a roof replacement at the Arichat Water Treatment Plant, approximately $60,000. We allowed $25,000 for that backwash engineering study. I think we talked about that initially during the capital discussions. So this is where we moved it. And the last one was installation of some district meters in Louisdale, and that was something that was supposed to have been done prior to the last rate study, but it wasn't done. So we've been advised that we ought to have it installed before the next rate study, which is imminent. So we're really going to make an effort to get those installed this year. We have the meters, it's just the work to install them at this point. And that gives us total expenses. Last year, 672,000. This year, we're looking at 821,000, but a lot of those expenditures are one-time expenditures and would not be year over year. Any questions on the expense side? We'll circle back. So if we look at the revenue side, there's 4 categories. The first is metered sales. So I won't go through them individually, but between the 3 areas, we had $330,000 in metered sales budgeted last year. Looks like we're at $335,000, and for the coming year, we're budgeting $340,000. So we don't often move it based on 1 year, but the last number of years would have shown that we're coming in a bit higher than 330, so we felt comfortable bumping it up. Base rate sales, that's the base rate on your meter. You have base rate plus consumption. So that figure last year budgeted at $180,000. It came in at about $183,500. So again, based on the last number of years, we feel that we can raise that one to $182,500. The next item is public fire protection, and that is the contribution or the fee paid by the municipality to the water utility for the use of water infrastructure for the purpose of fighting fires. So that fee again is a calculation from the UARB handbook. In this case, that $147,000 was calculated during the last rate study, but it was supposed to have been lower. But in order to avoid impacting water rates by too large a degree, they left it at $147,000. So in other words, the county paid a little bit more than it had to, so as not to reduce the amount, I guess, in too short a period. So it is forecasted at $147,000. And for this year, we also have it at $147,000, but with the next rate study, that number would be slated to be reduced and be calculated using the handbook. And other revenue would include interest, water disconnections, and the fees paid for new services and other income. So it was budgeted $15,000. She came in $31,600, and you can see that's predominantly from water disconnections and services. So we must have installed quite a few water services last year. And for the coming year, we're holding it pretty close to what was budgeted at $17,500. The water disconnection amount was really an anomaly last year, and we wouldn't expect that to be repeated. So on the total for water system revenue, $672 last year, budgeting $687,500 for the coming year. And that leaves us with an excess of expenses over revenue of $134,398. And while that does look bad, the way that we're budgeting for it, there's Jason will have to correct me, I'm going to call it a surplus or an operating reserve in the water utility from years where revenues were greater than expenses, and that amount would be covered by that account. This is not something we could sustain, of course, without looking at rates, but a lot of these are one-time expenses, so it shouldn't be taken as an indication of the health of the water utility.
Thanks, Chris. And I'll open it for questions. I have a couple, but maybe I'll offer counselors a chance to go first. So anyone have any questions for Chris?
I have one, well, yeah, actually, back on your water disconnection services, is that hookup as well?
That would be the 2,000 hookup fees, yes. And then if you shut off your water seasonally, for example, and there's a $50 charge, that would show up there as well.
Okay, so the only question I have on the hookup fee, if you run one line onto your property, are you permitted to split it into several lines and only pay the one hookup fee, or how does that work?
Right now, it's one service for one dwelling. If there was an outbuilding and you were servicing and running it into your home through the meter and then servicing the outbuilding, there would not be a second fee. That fee is basically for us going in and tapping another water connection on the line.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Any other questions? Chris, I just wanted to ask a little bit, ask for a little bit more context. Okay, where the heck did it go? Sorry, just let me see again. Yeah, the special assessment water treatment. I'm thinking I just missed a little bit on that. So, and I understand it's a one-time expense.
Those are actually annual. So what that is,
sorry, I mean the one up at line 118.
Oh, 118?
Yeah.
119?
Or sorry, 119. 119, yeah.
Yeah, so that's the one. So if we look 119, 129, 141,
And 113.
and 113. Those are all called special assessment. And what that number is, if we look last year, we had a transfer of 226,600, which was essentially expenses that we took from what we showed you in the sewer budget previously. That was an allocation to the water utility to cover things such as labor, vehicle expenses, other expenses. So essentially it's the water utilities portion of the municipal staff, you know, based on the work they do in the utility. So last year it was lumped into one line item, 226,600, but this year we're splitting it up between those areas because that's what the UARB likes to see.
Yeah, no, that's great. I wasn't fully understanding that. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Any other questions?
That only went up 6,800 then this year.
Yeah, we do a 3% change year over year on that one.
Yeah. I mean, to me, there's a few areas where, you know, like we estimated higher, we estimated low, depending. But I mean, at the end of the day, my thought was similar to what's happening, which is, you know, really we have that 105 of capital out of revenue, which is really what's driving us, you know, mostly into our deficit. So if we're pulling that from the reserve, like whatever.
Yeah. So
right, because if we are under or over budgeting, at the end of the day, it's just going to go to the reserve anyway. So
yeah, so what will happen when we do the rate study, we'll get into this in much more detail.
yeah.
But if we were running $100,000 deficit every year, we wouldn't wait until the reserve is depleted to change the rates.
Yeah, makes sense.
But we'll get into it in greater detail. And the fluctuations, if there's any account you're not sure about any of the others, we usually go back 2 or 3 years. So they end up being fairly consistent. So if you see big differences in 1 year, we don't get too concerned.
Yeah, I mean, the only ones that I saw that like made me sort of pause a little bit was, you know, like power and pump air shot. Like that's.
Yeah, those we kept.
Explained it and I missed it. I don't know. And power and pump Bluesdale. Yeah, like those ones there. But again, like it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
Yeah. Yeah, so those are one-time, that's a one-time expenditure on the Loosedale line item, 112. After next year, we would expect that to come down again. That
okay, I must have missed that.
The new chlorine analyzer.
Okay.
I'd just like to add on to some of what Chris said. So like the 105 in capital out of revenue, I think you mentioned that was new, right? So last year we had only budgeted 30. So I guess if you drop the 75 off the 135, that's the projected deficit. It's not really 135, I guess, if you're comparing from last year, it's 75,000 less. And again, I think he also mentioned is don't be alarmed by the fact that it's showing a deficit, because 2 things. One is there's an operating fund surplus in the water utility. So basically we're allowed to budget for a deficit in this instance that's just going to chew up the operating surplus. That's one side of it. And 2, we were basically all aware, I guess, with the last council that we were going to start to become in a deficit because you do a water rate study, you increase the rates, you build a new plant, you all of a sudden have increases in operating costs across the board. And eventually, the reason why you do another water rate study is because your expenses are now higher and you need to increase the rates again to compensate for your current expenses. So this is all, I guess, totally normal is what I would just say.
Yeah, a couple of the key things that you'll hear about later. In Arichat, we're dosing 2 chemicals now that we weren't dosing before, so those operational expenses are going up now. I mentioned already the fire protection amount. During the next rate study will have to be lowered to follow the calculation, so there's another, I'm going by memory, but it's in between 20 to 30,000 reduction in revenue for the water utility when we change that. On the plus side, it's a 20 to 30,000 benefit in the operating budget. And then the last item is that depreciation expense. That depreciation expense is calculated. And now that the new plant is complete, we had deferred the full impact of the new plant during the last rate study. So when we do the next one, there's likely to be some additional depreciation expenses there that would have to be built into a new water rate. So if you use actuals for this year as a comparison, we're at a deficit of 30,000 for the present fiscal forecasted. So that gives you a better sense of where we might be operationally if we exclude all those one-time items.
I guess you could argue too, Chris, that those special assessment charges are technically gonna go up, right? Wouldn't we think, or?
Yeah, I should have mentioned that number. I think we did mention it during the other budget discussions, but we don't have a full accounting of that cost on the water utility. So if we were really to look at people's labor, the amount of effort put into the water utility, if you include the finance department, admin, public works folks, the number that we transfer over, that 233,000 and change, really doesn't reflect that cost. You know, the last council made a conscious decision only to allocate, I believe it was 60% of the estimated cost. So in essence, subsidizing the water utility to an extent. And, you know, this council will have the same opportunity if they want to, you know, if they want to use the number from this rate study or use a number that more accurately reflects the cost or the effort being put into the utility for municipal resources. So we'll get into that a little later.
All right, thank you. Any other questions on this? Okay, so not hearing any. Maybe I'll just kind of get some consensus from councillors if you're okay with this budget as presented. So, Brent, or Councillor Sampson, you're okay. Councillor Sean Sampson. Yeah. Councillor Melanie Sampson. Okay, and Deputy Warden.
Yeah, I'm good. If I can ask, only because I'm sure I missed it. Public fire protection. What did you say that was covering, Chris?
That's essentially the municipality paying the water utility for the benefit we derive from their infrastructure for firefighting. So their transmission and distribution mains, you know, fire hydrants, things like that are used for fire protection. We have to pay a portion of the utility's operating costs for that benefit.
Okay.
And it is calculated through the handbook, so it's a requirement.
Okay. All right, so any last questions? I think we have consensus on having this budget approved. So, all right, so I think we're ready to move on. I don't know how much time you thought it might take for the sewer discussion. We did have 45 minutes left in our discussion for this evening, but recognizing it's also a lot of information. How much time do you think you'd need, Don, you'd need to proceed through that?
Well, I guess it all depends on how concise or precise Chris is when he's explaining it. Do a good job, Chris. We may get her done in 45 minutes.
Council wants to carry on, we can get started, and then you can mull it over, and we'll carry on if need be.
Okay, well, we still have 45 minutes left, so let's do our best here. And I want to say too, I appreciate the layout of the water utility budget, again, and the other budget as well. Very, very clean, very simple. Thank you for that.
So you might take that back when you see this one.
Uh-oh. I was still looking at my screen over here at the green and yellow and blue. You're gonna ruin my day, aren't you?
Is the new one up there now?
Yeah.
You might want to zoom in, Chris, and maybe close the window on the right side there. There's an arrow there that you can close that little, about halfway down the page. See the little arrow to the right?
Ah, I see it. It was hidden by everybody's pictures.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Well, a little too small. So this again is a first for us. We haven't typically presented this to council. So the way this sheet looked beforehand was more of a working sheet, not something we could have presented. It didn't read very well. So we made some changes to try and make it a little more user friendly. Oh, what this first sheet is, this one goes through all the sewer expenses, and it's set up into a number of categories. So what I'll do is scroll down first just to give you a sense of where we're going. So if we look at table 7, sewer service charges per sewer system, you'll see there's 4 cost categories. One is overhead cost, we have variable cost, direct cost, and then capital costs. Now capital costs have nothing to do with that reserve we talked about. This would be essentially interest and principal on loans that were outstanding for previous capital investments in the utility. So that's where we're going with all these tables up here. So if we start at table 1 for overhead costs, that takes 1/3 of public works admin salaries and expenses, and that's line 7 under environmental health services on the expense budget. I'm sorry, I'm going to bounce you around to that budget just so you can see where those numbers are coming from. So that's the overhead expenses, and then what we do with that is we allocate it based on the number of accounts per sewer system. So if you look to the right here under table 5, this has each sewer system with the number of accounts in total. And the next column is the percentage of their accounts as the total number of accounts. So what we would do is take that overhead expense, that overhead cost, multiply it by the percentage of the system as compared to the total, and we come up with the overhead allocated to each system. Now this is still being done as if we're tracking costs to each individual system, but the total is $60,791, which you'll see matches what we have in table 1 for overhead costs. So similar, table 2 looks at variable costs, and we take 50% of the sewage treatment salaries, which is line 9 under environmental health services, $203,608. And then we take half of the vehicle expenses, which is line 24 in the same budget. We take the laboratory testing for sewer, the entire expense, that's line 11 on the budget. 50% of materials and supplies other, that's line 22 under the expense budget. And then we take all of sewer services, which is line 23. So sewer services, it's essentially similar to water. If we put in a service on the sewer side, this is where the expense would go, or if for some reason we had an issue with a sewer service lateral on the portion we own, that expense would go there as well. So the total variable cost comes out to $276,108. And again, it was allocated based on the percentages of the accounts. You can see here where it falls for each of the 4 systems, the total being $276,108. And those are the only 2 categories that are allocated based on their percentage of accounts compared to the total. The next table is direct costs, and that's table 3. So for each of those systems, there's a line item in the health services budget. So Petit de Gras, for example, is line 13, Erie Shad 15, Evanston is 17, and Louisdale is 19. So each of those is added to the specific system under table 7 under direct costs, and the total is $155,000. The last one is a little more complicated. It's capital cost. And if you look at table 4, we have capital costs broken out by system. And these are numbers that Jason would provide. One of them, if you look at table 6, just to the right, you'll see that the number for Erie Shad matches, but one of those debentures is combined between Louisdale and Evanston. So that cost is split up 45% Evanston, 55% Louisdale, and then we take that number, throw it back into table 4, which ends up going on that capital cost column. So in total, it's $102,515. So if we subtotal all the systems, we'll say the total sewer service expenses or sewer expenses combined are $594,414. Now that does not include any targeted reserve. That's just the straight up expenses. So any questions on this side before I walk you through the sheet that goes through the reserve that we discussed previously?
So just to be clear, every single thing on this page is basically all stuff we've already talked about in the budget, already basically approved in the budget,
Yeah,
right?
the only ones you wouldn't have seen are table
Capital.
4, but table 6 feeds into 4. So table 4, I don't know if that would be in the budget, Jason. Am I right in saying that?
You like it.
Yeah, so it would be in the operating budget, and it would be under in government, general government services under our principal and interest payments. The totals are there, including any other loans that we have.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay, I thought so. Okay, good. Just
All right, so this table, if you look at the subtotals for each system, you're about to see that again here on the next page. This one is a lot busier, but the 3 tables are identical. The only thing that changes is the targeted reserve. So I'll focus on the first table for the time being. Excuse me. So I tried to label all these columns. I may have made it more confusing, but the first one I labeled it A. That is just copying over those budgeted expenditures from the previous page. So that $594,414 matches what we see here under subtotal for the sewer service charges. So that's our starting point. So after that, what we did was target a reserve amount. So this essentially is what we talked about with the asset management, where we were going to target an amount to put aside for future expenditures. So that column is where we throw the targeted reserve, and then we come up with the dollar figure for the targeted reserve. We add them together, and we get column D, which is required sewer revenue, which includes the budgeted expenditures, plus the amount we're saying we want to target for a reserve. So if we use 20% as the number, it comes out to $713,296. And if we scroll over a little further to column L, no, sorry, it's the next one. 118,883 is the amount that this would put in reserve, provided it came in where budgeted. So the rest of the calculation is a little less obvious. To bill sewer, we base it on water bills, and what we end up doing for the sewer side is calculating a ratio, which is the number we multiply the water bill by to come up with your sewer bill. So the way we come up with that, and I know you relish the discussion we had with that change in the bylaw. So we have to figure out budgeted water revenue for the coming year, and these numbers are subject to change. We're using numbers from a prior year because we don't have the estimates for the coming year yet, so this could change a little bit. But budgeted water revenue is $421,262. So all we do is divide the $713,296, which is the required sewer revenue, by the budgeted water revenue, and we say that we have to multiply each water bill by 1.69 for the total to add up to that $713,296 in sewer revenue. And what I did a little later in the table, if you look at column G, it shows the ratios that were in effect for each of those individual systems for prior years. And column H shows the ratio that would result from a 20% targeted reserve. And the column that you're probably most focused on is the percent change. So if you look at column I, these percentages show the change in the ratio from last year to this year by combining those sewer systems and using that 20% targeted reserve. So in this case, Petit de Gras, if a user was to use the same amount of water as last year, their sewer bills would go up 9%, Arichat would go up 21%, Evanston would go down 28%, and Louisdale would go up 18%. Now, what I'll do before I open it up is go through the calculation with a 10% reserve, which is what we would have had in place last year. So this would show you, I guess, status quo last year, with the only difference being combining the 4 systems into one utility, what the impact would be. And I went through this in, I think when we did the bylaw, in bylaw committee. So in this case, Petit de Gras was going to stay even because the ratio would only be set to 1.55 if we target a 10% reserve. Arichat would go up 11%, Evanston down 34%, and Louisdale up 8%. So again, these numbers might change depending on the budgeted water revenue. We don't know exactly where those are, but they're fairly consistent year over year. And the last thing I want to show you, I don't have the actual figures for what's in the accumulated in the reserve account, so I left those blank for now. But if you look at the targeted reserve, and again, this 10% multiplied by budgeted sewer expenses came out to a targeted reserve of 59,441. So that's repeated in this column, column L. The next column subtracts any planned expenditures out of that reserve. So you'll see there's a $40,000 line item there under Petit de Gras. That is new. It didn't show up anywhere else in the budget, and the reason for it is it just came up since the last meeting through a director from Nova Scotia Environment. So I guess I'll touch on that again in a second, but effectively the 59,441 we would have transferred to the reserve is now reduced by that 40,000 under this scenario, leaving 19,441 of budgeted transfer to reserve. And of course, that's budgeted numbers, so depending how the year goes, that could change. But under the other scenarios, if it was a 20% reserve, for example, it was 118,883 less that 40, which would result in just under 80,000 transfer. And if you used a 15% reserve, 89,162 reduced by 40 would give you 49,162. So that 40,000, just to let you know what it's for. As you know, our Evanston, our Arichat Petit de Gras plants are not compliant with effluent regulatory requirements. And we did a pre-engineering to replace those plants, which obviously is some time away. We've been non-compliant for some time, and Environment has issued a directive for both facilities, but for Petit de Gras specifically, because the flows are so much higher than design, they've asked us to do an inflow and infiltration study to see if we can find out where the extra water is coming from and reduce those flows. So that would be in the collection system. And by reducing flows at the plant, it should improve the effluent quality, although it might not be compliant. They do want us to make an effort and improve it as best we can. So that's what that 40,000 is to cover. It is something that was just issued. It was either Friday or Monday that we got the directive, so it wasn't included in the previous budget. So all that being said, fire away.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. You're right. This one's harder.
Oh, well, I mean, right now, Chris, our going rate is 1.5, correct? Mostly, like, give or
Right
take?
now, Petit de Gras would be 1.51. Erie Shad is 1.46. Evanston is 2.47. And Loosedale is 1.4. So by combining the sewer systems, all other things being equal, I will mention Evanston last year, we hadn't targeted 10%, it was 5, but for the most part, this analysis would still stand. The ratio would have to be 1.55 by combining all 4 of them. So, you know, Evanston goes down, Petit de Gras, not a big change. Erie Shad and Loosedale would go up. And that's just the effect of combining them. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong column. Petit de Gras would stand the same, Erie Shad would go up, Evanston down, and Loosedale up. And that's just the effect of combining the systems without increasing our targeted sewer reserve, anything greater than the 10%. And I should mention too, that that account last year, we expended 20,000 in Petit de Gras, 10,000 in Erie Shad, and I'm gonna wait for Jason to chime in, but I'm going to say 50,000 in Loosedale when we did the roof on the plant.
I think it was closer to 60.
Closer to 60. So out of that, so last year, for example, if our surplus was going to be, or our targeted reserve was going to be 60,000, we actually took 90,000 out of that account. So there was a net withdrawal from that reserve account last year. This year, we're looking at that 40,000 is all we're budgeting for. But out of that inflow and infiltration study, there will be some remedial work to be done as a result of it. Don't know the scope of it, don't know the timing of it. We'd have to confer with Nova Scotia Environment. So that 40,000 is just the initial cost.
And would you anticipate that any remediation would be this fiscal year, or would it be next? Like, I'm not sure how long it takes to do this type of study.
I would think it's going to be late in the year before we have that completed. It involves installing flow meters in the system and monitoring flows during rain events and things like that to try and isolate where the issues are, putting a camera in the lines and looking for inflow there. So I would anticipate getting the report this year, putting a plan together for next fiscal, and hopefully getting support from the environment for whatever the work plan might be. Now this work is not wasted, even if we get a new plant, because it's on the collection side, and the less water we have going to a facility, whether it be the existing one or the new one, will reduce the operating expenses. So it's certainly not wasted work.
Okay.
Do we have a separate reserve account for sewer? Like, I'm hunting through the financials. I'm just not seeing anything.
Yeah, so it's internally, we're always trying to be careful, I guess, when we talk about it. It's not a physical reserve set up on our financial statements.
Okay.
It's a surplus deficit type. I hate to use the word accrual too, but it's just a tracking of the sewer systems alone. Because in essence, what we're doing is the impact on all those sewers contained in the operating budget, we're just tracking the surplus deficit cumulatively to rip it out of the operating budget.
And what is that set at? Do you have that number?
So we'll have the number at March 31st, 2020. It was at 192,000 rounded.
So not very much.
Okay, but so 90,000, as Chris has just alluded, is what our known expenditures were. So that'll bring it down to 100 plus or any minus operating surplus or deficit once we do the sewer year end next month or later this month. And again, it comes back to the same analysis, I guess, as our reserves in the operating fund, is that 190 is not nearly enough money to put aside to withstand any, I won't even say major, but any mid capital type projects. And the goal should be to have that build as high as possible to sustain the rate so that the ratepayers don't see rate shock when these types of expenditures come up.
Yeah, that asset management presentation we had, it must be a couple of months ago now. Sewer was actually going to be have the biggest need for capital funds moving forward, and his analysis did not include the new sewage treatment plant. If you remember, when you look at that, if we look at our present policy that allows a 1 million contribution from the municipality, and we assume we had external funding to the tune of 73.33%, it would have left 2.2 million for the sewer customers to pay, and just that cost amortized even over 20 years was a substantial amount of money. So, you know, you can try to put more aside today to reduce that that debenture when the time comes and lessen the impact at that time, or you can wait until the time comes and then incur a much bigger increase at that time. But that plant is just one item. We still have all the other old infrastructure that has to be maintained. So sewer is one where, you know, we really need much more money than we have. It's going to be a challenge.
Yeah.
So you've got some scenarios then presented here for us, based on our conversation and that need. Are you recommending the 20% reserve? Is that?
That we would recommend that as the starting point, but you know, as staff, we recognize we look at things from an operational lens, and council has to consider other things. So, you know, 10% would be comparable to last year if you want to use a benchmark. So 10% would be status quo, if you will, other than the impact from combining those plants.
Yeah, you guys would have seen on the operating side, and obviously Chris went through his whole budget on the environmental health services. And then when I presented the revenue side a couple of meetings ago, I think we were in person that night, we had showed the 118,883, which is on Chris's sheet there as a 20%. So that 118,883 is currently what we have worked in on the revenue side, and currently what we have worked in on the expense side. So aside from just being an educational, informational thing for council, it's really only this 118 that you guys have to make a decision on as to whether you want that rate to be 20, 15, 10, 0, 5. And of course, right now we have 20% worked in.
Yeah, but it doesn't change our bottom line because it's an in and out, right? So.
Correct.
Yeah.
It changes the rate to the ratepayer.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
And that's what Chris is showing you is the effect on adding that 20% instead of 10%.
Yeah, it just changes what the surplus is in the sewer.
Well, it would change the rate as well.
No, I know, but that's what I'm saying. The rate change doesn't make it, you know, if there's zero reserve, then the and I'll use the term utility, although I know it's not right, but then the sewer system would basically break even.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So
that's what the budget for, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's say, sorry, go ahead.
So just to kind of follow that thought process through, right now I'm looking at line 20 under our expenses, environmental health services, sewer capital reserve, 118,883. That reflects the 20% reserve.
Yeah.
And I understand that's an in and an out, but it does impact the ratepayers. But then if you go down to the 15 or the 10% reserve, it changes our targeted reserve. So that would impact our budget.
No, because it's going to come in as a revenue and go out as an expense.
It's just coming in and out. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
If you guys tell us to drop this 20%, we're going to drop it on the revenue side and the expense side.
On both ends. Yep, great. Cool.
So the difference between the 10% and the 20% obviously is it's a 10% change on their bills. I don't pay a sewer bill myself, but I don't know if you recall the averages, Jason, from when we do the annual, I think it was something close to like between 400 and 500 for most of them, with Evanston being the outlier. So if we were to say the average bill combined was going to be, you know, use 500 for a round number, we're talking about an extra $50 a year to go with the 20% reserve versus the 10, but that will be on top of the increase that some will already be paying, essentially for combining the 4 sewer systems and covering off some of the much higher expenditures for Evanston and reducing their bill.
The advantage of working from home is I'm looking up what mine is.
If you're-
Because
Look at you with your little
mine is a
suitcase of
doozy,
pills.
right? Because I suspect mine is a doozy. So
Yeah, I think we talked about your water bill before. It's on the high side.
no, I know. That's why I'm saying, right? If we could say what it is for like a crazy person like me, that would be helpful. And I have no idea. So yeah. So I mean, like my sewer. No, that's not.
Yeah, if you have your water, we can figure it out that way too.
So many bills, none of them the ones that I'm looking for. Anyway, just talk amongst yourselves. I'm gonna find it. It's here.
Yeah, I suspect your bill is probably close to $1,000 for sewer. You're using about 150.
Okay, so my last sewer bill, so my quarterly sewer bill is somewhere like around $335 a quarter. That's huge.
Better cut down on that water usage, honey.
I gotta cut the people out of my house, and I'm working on it.
How
I
many
would
people
say
you got
your
living
water
there?
bills are probably twice the average, close to twice the average based on those numbers. The
Yeah,
average,
like my water bill is like whatever. In that same period, it was like $200 or something.
yeah, an average
Thank
water
Lily
bill.
for contributing to our fund.
I'm doing my best, bud. I'm doing my best. But I guess that's what I'm saying is if you took my sewer bill, which is probably one of the craziest of all, right? And we added 13% to it, that would be like, I'm just using it as that would be like $40 a quarter.
Yeah.
But if you're using sewer as much as me and you can't afford $40 a quarter, you should probably move on. Right? So the average person is probably like at least half of what I have, right? Do you think?
Probably a little higher than half, but close, yeah.
So maybe $25 a quarter in the difference if we were at the 15%.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So I mean,
Any
my
other
thought process here is that we have, like, you know, Evanston, and I don't like to say ignore Evanston. Clearly, I don't mean that because they're in my district, right? But they're going to be just pumped that theirs is going down. So like whether theirs goes down 34 or 28%, they're happy as can be. You know, Petit de Gras is, you know, is under 10%, no change at all. So like everybody needs to have a little bit of a pain there, I think, you know. You know, I have concerns with Ayrshire at 16 and 21%, right? So I think 16 is like the top end of what we can expect them to have an adjustment in a year. But that's not my district, so I'll just zipper my mouth.
I mean, like all the other reserves, I mean, certainly we'd love to see them as high as we can get them, but we know that we can't do everything in 1 year. So, you know, you've been through the discussions on the other ones as well.
It's not your district, Monty, but I'm running in Evanston next time.
Okay, but it's yours.
Yeah, so I mean, I would tend to agree. Again, I'm in the same boat. I don't pay a water or a sewer bill, but when I look at a jump of 21 and 18%, it seems like a lot to me, especially, you know, considering, you know, to your point, Sean, from earlier, many of our residents are on fixed incomes, limited, you know, ability to bring more revenue into their homes. So that those jumps are pretty scary, but at the same time, recognizing we have a massive reserve problem with sewer.
I believe those low-income persons actually qualify to get half their sewer bills back as well.
Chris,
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Chris.
Don't thank me, thank Kathleen. She's the one that told me.
Kathleen, yeah. You got forms for that, Kathleen? Is she on here somewhere? Yeah.
I said I wasn't willing to reveal my sources.
I got to give credit where credit is due.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
you know, and that's,
yeah,
it is a good point. I think it might be helpful to have even hard copies or maybe on our website links to some of those rebate programs. So, you know, and even making sure that our senior safety coordinator is, I know she's well aware of them, but just kind of refreshing all that information, assembling it in one place, given that we are considering an increase here. So.
yeah. So 20% increase is 9, 21, and 18 for Louisdale, and a 15% is here. Yeah. Over and above a 3% tax increase and whatever else, right? It's yeah. Yeah.
We do, Warden, put the seniors rebate info in our reflections.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's great.
And although it's a provincial program, I will say that the finance staff at the front are very generous in helping seniors fill out those forms and send them off in any way that we can each year. We get a huge influx of people looking for help.
That's awesome, Jason. Thanks for saying that. I think it's important, especially in a year like this. Is that the practice with a rebate program for sewer as well? Like I'm not familiar with those.
Yeah, I think it's all done as part of the same application. So, and
Perfect.
they need proof from the municipality of their bills from the prior year. So a lot of seniors, of course, are looking for help also to fill out the forms. And so I think finance staff are definitely going over and above in that respect.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. Any questions then on any of these options? So at this point, maybe I'll just poll councillors on where you think our reserve should be at the 10, 15, or 20 mark. So Councillor Melanie Sampson, I'll start with you first. No, it's not fair. I'm always starting with you first, but you're on this side of my screen. Literally,
I know. I'm just, like, there's the part of me that says, like, I'd like to say 10%, but then the other part of me that says I'd like to say 15.
Right.
I say no to 20. How's that?
Okay. Okay, no to 20.
And maybe I'd like a little bit of time. Like, do we need to decide this today?
You know what? We don't need to decide this today.
I mean, I'd like to hear people's opinions. Like, I'd like us to each have our turn, but I don't know that I'm really all the way ready.
Okay.
Sorry.
Councillor Brent Sampson, I don't know if you want to provide an opinion on this.
I think I'd defer on this one only because it's, there's nothing in my district that, has water or sewer. So I think I gotta defer to those who know it better than me on this one.
Go with 20,
I think it would be
go
good
with
to
20.
try and make a decision. What's that?
Go with 20.
Yeah, no, I think it would be good to make a decision though. We're in about our 8th budget meeting or so, and I guess we want to get it done before next fiscal year. So.
This one doesn't impact your operating, so you could really defer and not have it impact the budget process.
Okay.
Well, actually, we would still like it decided because I do have to reflect it in the expenses and revenue.
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm saying, if this is the only outstanding issue, it can easily likely be dealt with a poll through email or what have you as to how it's going to be reflected in the final budget for when it comes to council, right? So if whenever the CAO, whenever staff basically plan to bring the budget forward to council, then basically by then is when you have to know, but it doesn't have to be decided tonight.
Yeah, so I mean, our goal, I think, would be to approve the budget in our May 24th council meeting. So, I mean, we could even, I don't know, maybe this procedurally, Don, maybe I'll look to you for an answer on this, but we could, put it on our committee of the whole meeting to give councillors an opportunity to just chime in after they've had some time for reflection. Would that make sense? Or
I don't really think we'd need to refer to committee of the whole meeting. If councillors wanted to make a decision, they could just contact myself or Jason and give us.
So we can do that by, like
Yeah.
that'll be okay if we do that by email. Yeah.
Yeah. So in the past, we would discuss that, Jason and I and Chris, and we would make a decision on the percentage that we would increase it by. We wouldn't ask council. So we did that on our own in the past.
Okay.
But I think it's good to get you folks involved in understanding how it happens and making that decision on where we want to be. I certainly agree that 20 is high at this stage of the game, and 10's a little low considering that we have a planned expenditure of $40,000, which is going to really destroy, any surplus that we have this year. And in order to make a step forward, it doesn't take much for $19,000 to get chewed up on a moment's notice. We lost the roof on the sewer plant in Lucedale that cost us $60-some thousand. So it's always nice to have that reserve there. And I know that there are some reservations on taking it up to 20, but I mean, 15 is a middle of the road type of number, and it still provides us with almost a $50,000 increase in our surplus. That's only if nothing else happens throughout the year. So, you know, it would seem as though it might be the logical choice. If we were doing this on our own, I think that's probably the number that we would use.
Okay, thanks, Don. So we can reflect on this and do by email if we can't make a decision tonight, but let me just maybe finish the polling. So Councillor Sean Sampson?
Yeah, no, I'm with Councillor Melanie and the CEO. I mean, 20 is a bit much. 10 probably might not be enough. So, what's left, right? So, you know, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Deputy Warden?
Yeah, I kind of, I guess I have to follow Brent's train of thought. I have no water and sewer in my district, so theoretically it doesn't affect me. I know it does overall, but you know, it definitely affects Melanie and Sean more than it does me. So I'm good with the decision of the rest of council.
Guess I
Or
would
with the
say-
recommendation of, honestly, or with recommendation of the CAO or Public Works.
Okay.
So 15, I guess, seems to be the, personally, from what I'm hearing, 15 seems to be the acceptable limit tonight. So I would say I would support 15.
And
Yeah,
I'm fine
and
with
I
that. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, it's fine. It's,
Okay.
I think
All
the
right,
majority of
so-
people are happy for that, so that's good.
Okay. And I mean, I would support it as well. Like, again, same comments, very concerned about what's going into reserve, but also very conscious of the fact that this is yet another increase.
Yeah. And I believe Don just said it best. If they were looking at it, they would probably pick the 15 as well. And we usually don't get to see it. So I say we go on the recommendation of the 15.
All right. So it looks like we have a decision then, so we don't need to worry about email follow-up. Is that, I just want to make sure there's no large red flags on that. Okay, wonderful. Okay, well, thanks very much. So it's 8:52. We have 8 minutes to spare. What do you want to talk about now?
So yeah, if the plan is to approve it at May Council, then I will make all the necessary adjustments and have it balanced, and hopefully send you guys out just the final draft documents one more time. And then in advance of the May Council, I'll prepare the necessary memos and the motions. What I'll do is I include in the memos basically what the wordings and the motions are from the prior year. And in the budget one, there's a big long motion that somebody, whoever's making the motion, would basically have to read out. So all that'll be basically ready for you guys just to follow through on.
Okay. All right, that's really great. Jason, thanks for your presentation this evening, and Chris as well. Despite that last spreadsheet or whatever that was, Chris, it was really easy to understand. So it wasn't pretty colors and stuff, but it was really easy to understand. So thank you for your effort on that. I appreciate it. Any other, I guess, final thoughts?
I was just thinking,
Okay.
you kind of mentioned it earlier with the soup report days and stuff like that. Like, whereas we did get, you know, confirmation that that's going to be virtual, so they obviously aren't going to require the same amount of funding this year. Do we want to transfer that back to one of those reserves? You know what I mean? I know it's kind of a drop in the bucket. It's a small thing, but it's probably not necessary to be there anymore.
Yeah.
I think we have to do that at a meeting, don't we? Like committee at a whole meeting or
No, this is budget, right?
It is, yeah. So they had said that they were going virtual. That was decided a while ago. Yeah, for sure. And I spoke to them about it and the chamber, and they both said they would continue to appreciate that amount because they are going to be doing virtual events, and there's a cost to that as well. So, but it's up to council if you want to address that now. Yeah, and neither are the sponsorship opportunities. Yeah. You're right. The cost is not the same, but neither are the sponsorship opportunities. Anyway, but to that, to that point, we can definitely discuss that now if we want to make changes to those grants.
No,
Melanie,
to me, I mean, to me, we already got it approved at where we're at, and everything's approved with the numbers in place and everybody's wish list in place. So to me, I would just leave it there, and if we don't use it, then there's a cushion we're looking for anyway, right? So I'll leave it there.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
I just thought that we had sort of said that 300,000, like that listing is not really part of our budget. The number at the bottom is part of our budget, and like we're not approving that list. It like that's sort of a theoretical list. Do you know what I mean? So we can adjust that as we move forward.
Yeah, just focus on the number, like you said. Yeah, I mean.
Right, like
Right,
what we,
yeah.
like, again, we talked about that before, right? If we find that
Right.
with the transit, we have 100,000 set aside, but we only need 60, well, then that 40 goes into the pot. So we're not writing them a check for 100 because we've approved 300 for that pot, right? We approved 300 for that pot. We've roughly estimated whatever. So but that being said, I do think that we need to create, again, a bit of policy around what that 300,000 is used for. And then we might, we'll ensure that it fits the criteria for the ones that we're like set on, all in that group, right? But
My only concern there would be Jason, I believe, or maybe he's going to bring it up, right? There were some groups that already approached you. Did you not say, like, wanting this funding kind of thing, like some of the museums or something, right? So, I mean, if we're approving this, then that's giving him the go-ahead to sort of write these checks. We don't have to go through them individually necessarily as the year goes on. There might be other things within that 60,000 we had spoke about that aren't particularly earmarked and we'll look into. But if I guess Jason can clarify this, but if we're approving this for him to go ahead and, write the checks to those organizations now, and it's not necessarily going to come back to us. I was under the understanding this is what we're deciding now, right?
Yeah, so generally speaking, in the past, Brent's right, is that as it stands, if council's approving the budget, then basically you're giving me full authority to pay these amounts out. The only one that I, of course, wouldn't pay out would be the SAT one, based on the safe restart funding discussions, of course, right? But it's not to say that you can't change that process. It's just we need to be clear about, once the budget's approved, as if a group calls me and says, hey, did council approve my 2,000? Generally speaking, my answer would be yes, and I would pay that out whenever they wanted me to. If you're looking to add some type of an accountability or a process, or do you need the money, do you not, can you provide us financials? Well, that's a whole different ballgame than what we've done in the past. So I guess I just need clear direction as to what we're doing with the 239.5 that's been tagged, I guess.
My only understanding on that was like the transit, like you say, if we are able to access that 40,000, then obviously that would be fantastic, but we wouldn't have to pay out. But I kind of thought that's what we did on the first meeting, right? We went through that list and every single one basically, discussed what was on our mind at that time. So I thought that was the point of that. So
okay, I
so it could go
misunderstood.
forward.
Yeah, no, and I was the same, Brent, but at that point, both, I know maybe not the chamber stuff, but definitely the Superport Day stuff was all, they were proceeding virtually. That was their plan from the get-go. My apologies if that didn't come across, but I did contact Tim Guilfoyle, and he said that would be, that would be still appreciated. I think what we could do is, because I'm just looking at the time here this evening, we could do like we talked about before and start to group these grants into categories so that we can, like you say, apply some policy around it. So if they don't need it this year, then, that's more is the better. But there are things like the food banks, the Rock Society, all of those ones, like even Celtic Colors, like they're definitely going to go virtual this year, right? Well, I would assume anyway, right? So, it does mean a big change in their operating costs, but it also means a huge change in their operating revenue. So,
Yeah, I don't think that was the impression you had given us though before about,
Okay, well, I apologize if I missed the.
No,
I don't know about the chamber,
specifically
right?
told us you specifically told us they were going ahead, but that was obviously before the numbers increased to the, to the extent they are now, right? So,
and I think the chamber
I would have
at that
assumed they might have
time,
been too at that point.
Yeah.
So,
I think the chamber at that time, Councillor Sampson, was planning on going ahead, and they may still because they do so many things. With the Superport days, it's a little different. They're like a once a year thing, like that's it, right? So we can, if there's an appetite for councillors to, do we want to review this list again? We're obviously not going to get through it this evening, but we certainly
Yeah, I
can
think
set up
we had done
another
that
date for us
first
to
night.
do that. Yeah, we did. Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
So did we want to set a time to make some changes, or try to make some changes now? I'm just a little conscious of the time.
I mean,
So-
I was just thinking that was a couple of things that it seemed like the story had changed since when we originally, but I think pretty well everything else, I thought we had went over that. Like that was the whole point. We spent 3 hours one night on that meeting.
Yeah,
We didn't
exactly. And
accomplish
I'd rather not rehash it. I think probably the only one, and again, my apologies if I didn't make it clear that Superport Days was proceeding virtually, but they definitely are going to proceed virtually. The chamber, I just don't know. Celtic Colors, excuse me, I'm pretty sure they've announced virtual. I'm just trying to think what else on here would be.
I guess what I would say is if there's a handful of them that you just want me to simply check as to whether the events are going ahead or not, then
Yeah.
you can approve this like this, and then, you can take my word for it that I'll check with the group, and basically, if they say they don't need the money, well, I'm not going to just cut them a check. So
Yeah.
in the essence of COVID, I can do some checking. I'm just saying that generally speaking, if the 2,000 is approved to the museum, they're going to need the money, and I'd like to be able to just say, yes, it's approved versus no, we're not sure if you're going to get that money. That's all.
Right. I love that approach. I don't know how others feel, but I
Yeah,
like that
that sounds.
Yeah.
idea of checking.
100%.
How
Yeah.
about Canada Day, Laurier? Are you hearing anything on that? Any indication on that at all? Or?
Nothing yet. Still kind of waiting to see. I mean, still early, but again, assuming that these restrictions will stick around for a little bit longer, so it'll be touch and go.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did get approval for some funding, but again, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we're good then. I'll accept a motion to adjourn us for this evening.
I will do that
Council-
with pleasure.
Okay. Thank you. All right, I'm trying to
wouldn't
keep
do it just
everybody
out
on
of
my
spite,
screen
right?
here.
My office is so warm, I can't wait to get out of here.
I am the same. I'm cooking
melting
in here.
I'm melting into 100 pieces. It's brutal.
I'm the same. Yeah, and I'm sorry, I just can't see all your faces at once. So if somebody's doing, whatever, and I miss you, I apologize. But we have a motion to adjourn. Can I have a seconder, please?
Who do you have that made the motion?
Me.
I
Okay,
think it was Melanie, yeah.
myself or Sean.
Okay.
I guess Sean just put up his hands, so wherever's, Brent doesn't want to go tonight.
Okay, everybody's motioning to adjourn. All right, so there's our seconder. And all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. Thank you so much. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
Okay.
guys.
Bye.
Have a good night. Yep.